Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. In the world where our hero ended up, only high-rank magic abilities matter, everything else is trash. But Derek is an ordinary low-rank hired magic teacher. However, he had a system that let him master new magic levels faster than anyone else. Noble kids did not respect him, so an aristocrat's daughter could freely mock him and beat him as much as she wanted. But the hero's teaching methods were not like those in academies, and he did not bow to that spoiled brat. So he just drove her into a night forest, and coldly promised to kill her if she did not squeeze out at least a spark. She ran away, stumbling and gasping, stumbling at every step. He threw a fireball at her, missed on purpose, just to laugh at her panic. She kept running, barely breathing. When she tripped over another root, and death was just inches away, suddenly her magic activated. But earlier he was nobody, a poor outcast with no money and no skills. His only chance to learn anything was an old first-level mage, who grumbled at the whole world. The old man taught him magic, but always said, "Without noble blood, you will not get higher." Yet the hero grasped everything on the fly. In a short time, he already cast his first spell, and after another training session, they sat in their camp. While drinking, the old man told Derek that noble children beyond Ebelstein could reach 3 stars before adulthood. He warned Derek not to get arrogant, insisting a low-born mage like him would hit his limit at 2 stars. Again and again, he preached that magic was decided by bloodline and that effort alone was futile. Those lectures planted in Derek the idea that nobles and commoners were separated by an unbreakable wall, perhaps reflecting the old man's own failures. That night, those bitter words lingered with Derek longer than usual. Rain fell through the darkness as the uneasy silence stretched on. When Derek returned the next day, he found the old man dead. The body was covered in bruises, as if he had been savagely beaten before dying. At first Derek assumed the old man had simply picked the wrong fight. Only later did he learn the guards had beaten the old man to death. Derek buried him alone, giving the liar a grave despite everything. The official story was that the old man had been caught stealing a 2-star spell book from a warehouse, something no one could understand. To everyone else it looked like a pointless crime from a man who had long since given up ambition. But Derek remembered that the old man had always obsessed over bloodlines. Even so, Derek knew he himself could not possibly have noble blood, because he was not originally from this world at all. 4 years passed, and Derek kept moving forward in Ebelstein. During that time he met Katia Flameheart. She had once been the mistress of the fallen Viscount House Flameheart, a noble-born 3-star mage sought after by mercenary groups. While staying in Ebelstein, she worked through the Beldun mercenary corps and took Derek, then a young 1-star mage, under her wing. From Katia, Derek learned far more than he ever had before from a true 3-star mage. Their lessons and work centered around the tavern Beldunstyr. Katia told Derek that ambition was natural for a mage, especially for someone as talented as he was. Still, she warned him that greed could ruin his progress if he let it control him. Derek accepted the warning, though he remained as guarded as ever. Katia then guided him into deeper training, telling him to shut out distractions and feel his mana directly. She taught him to sense where mana was born, understand its flow, and use it to make imagined effects real. As Derek followed her instructions, his mana reacted violently enough to shake the building. Watching him, Katia concluded that he possessed unusually large innate mana and remarkably stable control. Derek himself felt something changing inside him as the mana settled into a new level. Katia immediately realized he had just broken through. The disturbance drew alarm from the tavern and the street outside. People panicked, thinking some kind of attack or explosion had struck nearby. As the commotion spread, Derek instinctively prepared to respond. Katia stopped him before he could move. She quietly ordered him to stay silent and follow her lead. Outside, the others searched for the source of the noise while Katia steered Derek away from attention. She led him through a back route, keeping him hidden from the crowd. Derek followed, confused by her urgency. Once they were alone, Katia told him to listen carefully because what came next mattered. He braced himself, sensing this was more than a simple warning. Katia explained that nobles guarded their privileges fiercely, and magic was the greatest privilege of all. She told him that among nobles, natural magical strength was praised, but among commoners the same gift could become dangerous. A commoner reaching 3 stars was already rare, she said, and what Derek had just done was even more alarming because he had used a 2-star spell before his coming of age. She identified the spell as the 2-star delusion spell Auditory Hallucination, marking Derek's rise to a 2-star mage at only 14. The world itself confirmed the breakthrough by granting him access to 2-star magic and that specific spell. Afterward, Katia kept traveling with him, teaching him more spells and even sharing lessons about noble society. A year later, however, Katia left. Derek later heard she had been appointed private tutor to the powerful county of Elvester, a position tied to one of the most influential noble houses in the realm. For Katia, accepting that offer was the only sensible choice. Becoming the magic teacher of a noble that powerful was a life-changing opportunity. Before leaving, she gave Derek a 2-star spellbook, and it greatly expanded the range of magic he could learn. Left on his own again, Derek studied the book relentlessly. Another year passed, and through self-study he mastered 2 more 2-star spells. By 16, he had no intention of stopping his climb. Back at Belden's tier, a new opportunity arrived. Jaden, the mercenary captain, told Derek they had finally received a proper request. The request came from House Duplain of the Grand Duchy, a name so prestigious that Jaden could barely contain his excitement. Derek immediately questioned why a house that powerful would hire people like them at all. Jaden brushed the concern aside, dazzled by the wealth and influence attached to the Duplain name. He argued that even one successful job could open future connections with the Grand Duchy. Derek asked for the actual task instead of the dream attached to it. Jaden claimed it was simple monster suppression on the edge of the Grand Duke's territory, and insisted nobles would not lie about such a request. Derek remained suspicious, because a family that large should not need a small mercenary corps for something so trivial. Trusting his instincts, he refused the job and told Jaden to find someone else. He made clear that he did not take work that smelled wrong. Jaden protested that mages were scarce in mercenary groups, and that Derek was the only one available for the request. Derek still argued that needing a mage for a few monsters made no sense, and that he wanted no part in unnecessary trouble. As he tried to leave, Jaden stopped him with one last offer. The advance alone was 1 gold coin. That amount gave Derek pause despite himself. At that moment the supposed clients were revealed. The dispatch officer and maid were clearly people of much higher station than they had claimed. The hooded young woman with them also carried herself like someone far above a servant. Jaden tried to force Derek into proper courtesy, but Derek flatly refused to bow. The older man looked down on him as an untested child and mocked the idea of sending someone so young on the job. Jaden hurried to defend Derek, insisting he was the best mage he knew. The noble man dismissed that defense and prepared to leave, unwilling to trust the task to a mere boy. The maid quietly intervened, stopping him from ending the meeting outright. Her intervention shifted the mood, and all 3 clients watched Derek more carefully. The hooded young woman then addressed Derek directly and asked to speak with him. The scene shifts to the Grand Duchy of Duplain, where the truth behind the request begins to unfold. In battle, Derek cut down goblins with ruthless efficiency. His focus in combat was cold and absolute. He killed 1 goblin in a single decisive strike. Another tried to attack from behind, only to be met just as quickly. Derek cut that one down as well before it could touch him. Soon the goblins were the ones fearing him. He finished the rest with magic, wiping out the group almost instantly. After the slaughter, he calmly reported that the job was complete. The disguised noble trio could only react with surprise at how effortlessly he had done it. The hooded young woman, in particular, took a strong interest in him after seeing his strength firsthand. That night, back at the tavern, the aftermath of the job stirred new conflict. A blonde woman named Pelline accused Derek of becoming a noble's dog for taking their work. She insisted that no matter how poor commoners were, they should never submit themselves to nobles. Then she demanded to know how much money could possibly make him abandon that pride. When Jaden answered that the advance had been 1 gold coin, she was stunned. Jaden could not hide his satisfaction at the reaction. Pelline's outrage instantly turned into greedy amazement. She immediately begged for the same chance, turning the argument into a joke. Once the noise died down, someone asked Derek how the request had actually gone. He downplayed the fight itself as nothing special, but said the clients had lied from the start. He explained that all 3 of them had been pretending to be lower-ranking servants than they really were. Jaden asked how Derek could be so sure. Derek pointed out that the supposed dispatch officer lacked the youth, stamina, and sociability he himself had claimed to be seeking, and that the maid's hands were far too clean for rough labor. He had noticed those inconsistencies even during the job. He also singled out the so-called trainee inspector as another obvious false identity. Derek's suspicions had been sharp from the beginning. Jaden answered that mercenaries survive by doing the work and taking the money, not by prying into their clients' secrets. Derek reluctantly accepted that practical logic for now. He reflects that in the wild, survival and earning a living matter more than anything else. The next day, they were summoned to the Grand Duchy of Duplain itself. At the goblin site, Derek formally reported that the threat had been dealt with and would not return soon. Jaden tried to turn the successful result into a discussion of the remaining payment. Instead of haggling, the noble side casually produced even more gold. Jaden was thrilled by the sight of 2 gold coins, while Derek stayed focused on the real issue. The older nobleman then decided to drop the pretense. He openly praised Derek's ability and asked whether Derek would accept a new request. Jaden was still trying to keep up with the sudden change in tone. The new offer was worth 15 gold coins, a sum so large it stunned everyone. The noble asked plainly whether Derek would take it. Derek answered yes without hesitation. Soon after, a carriage carried them deeper into noble territory. They arrived at Duplain's residence, a place grand enough to make their own status feel painfully small. Even Jaden was awed by the scale of the Grand Duke's home. Before entering, the older man finally offered proper introductions and told them to speak freely, since they were no longer strangers. He revealed himself as Delan, the Grand Steward serving Grand Duke Duplain, and apologized for hiding his status earlier. Jaden was rattled by how high above them this man actually stood. The maid introduced herself as Katerina, the Grand Duke's head maid. Jaden hurried to offer respectful greetings now that he understood who they really were. Derek notes that his suspicions had been correct all along. The supposed dispatch officer was the Grand Steward, the maid was the head maid, and their true ranks were even higher than he had expected. A cloaked visitor arrives at the Duplain residence, drawing immediate attention. As the white-haired boy listens, he realizes the person seeking him out is someone important. The newcomer steps forward and formally presents herself. Her entrance carries enough weight to make the moment feel decisive. The boy studies her carefully, unsure what to expect. She introduces herself as Isline Eleanor Duplain, eldest daughter of House Duplain, and asks to hire him as magic tutor for her younger sister Daila. The offer shocks him, since tutoring a noble lady is far beyond what he imagined for himself. The story shifts to the Duplain residence, where the family's internal trouble is already boiling over. Inside the manor, tension hangs over the Grand Duke's office. Raig bursts in and demands that his father and Valerian pay attention to an urgent grievance. The Grand Duke rebukes Raig for barging in and orders him to behave with dignity. Raig refuses to calm down and insists the real disgrace is Daila, accusing her of abusing the servants he hired. The maid at the center of the complaint is left trembling and in tears. Valerian tries to contain the scene and reminds Raig that he is interrupting an important discussion with their father. Raig presses harder, saying servants keep quitting because Daila destroys things whenever she pleases. He accuses his father of protecting Daila no matter how violent and unruly she becomes. Valerian shouts at him to stop before he goes too far. He finally orders Raig to leave and end the outburst. Raig falls silent for a beat, but only to gather himself. He argues that if Daila is useless, the family should rely on Isline instead. Raig goes further and proposes abandoning Daila altogether. The Grand Duke coldly reminds him that such a decision is not his to make. Raig reveals he has already investigated sending Daila to a monastery, framing it as a cleaner solution than keeping her as a burden on the family. That suggestion crosses the line, and the Grand Duke violently slams Raig down. Raig is driven face first into the desk under his father's strength. The Grand Duke repeats that Raig has no authority over Daila's fate. Even pinned and bloodied, Raig warns that his father will eventually have to choose. The Grand Duke is left brooding over the threat. Back in the present, Isline arrives at the manor with the white-haired mercenary she recruited. She asks whether he has heard of her younger sister Daila, and he admits he only knows the name from the family registry. Isline confirms that Daila exists, but is largely hidden from public notice. Their arrival interrupts the heavy atmosphere inside the residence. Valerian notices Isline and comes to receive her, with Raig still nursing his injury nearby. Valerian greets Isline warmly, and asks how she has been faring in Ebelstein. She answers politely that she has been living comfortably thanks to the family's support. Seeing Raig injured, Valerian cuts the reunion short, and Isline accepts the delay without complaint. The mercenary quietly observes the brothers and the strained household dynamic. Valerian and Raig both turn guarded as they size up the outsider Isline brought with her. The boy's attention sharpens as he takes in the hostility around him. He also notices the frightened maid still shaken by what happened earlier. That glimpse tells him the family's problem is deeper than a simple tutoring request. Once seated before the Grand Duke, Isline resumes the formal purpose of her visit. She introduces the white-haired boy as the magic tutor she brought from Ebelstein and says he has agreed to take charge of Daila. The Grand Duke gives the arrangement a measured, skeptical look. Isline politely offers to withdraw if he is too busy to discuss it further. Instead, the Grand Duke stops the boy and orders him to remain behind. The boy silently accepts the summons. The room settles into a private interview. The Grand Duke reviews papers while considering the candidate. He remarks on how young the boy is and confirms that he is only 16. The boy answers plainly that he is. Asked about his magic, he admits he can only use a little one-star magic. That modest answer makes the Grand Duke laugh rather than dismiss him outright. He warns the boy not to hide behind false humility, because it can look less like virtue than evasion. The boy stays quiet, weighing the man in front of him. He realizes the Grand Duke is a 5-star mage, and that empty modesty will not fool him. So he apologizes for any disrespect, and the Grand Duke says he understands how great talent can distort a person's bearing. Still, the Grand Duke bluntly says the boy's age and appearance make him seem unsuited to be a noble girl's tutor. The boy answers honestly that he is a mercenary, not a polished scholar. The Grand Duke decides that because Isline chose him, he will allow him access to the annex where Daila lives. As he dismisses him, the boy asks for permission to raise one more matter. The Grand Duke allows him to continue. The boy explains that as a mercenary, once he accepts a commission he intends to see it through. He makes clear that Isline hired him specifically to teach Daila magic and prepare her to enter noble society properly. The Grand Duke impatiently asks why he is restating what is already obvious. The boy answers that he has a serious request to make before he begins. That catches the Grand Duke off guard. Before the request is answered, a plate suddenly flies elsewhere in the annex. A maid is nearly struck and recoils in terror as the dish shatters beside her. She desperately apologizes to Daila, but Daila rejects the apology as worthless coming from a servant. Daila orders the maid out of her sight and threatens worse violence if she appears again. Elsewhere, Isline questions why the tutor had to be someone like Derek when noble magic masters should have been available. Her companion explains that a commoner mercenary would normally struggle to serve as a noble's tutor. Isline reveals she already tried nearly every famous magic master she could find, and all of them gave up on Daila. So she deliberately chose someone desperate enough to persist, especially one who understood both hardship and noble manners through his fallen noble master. She believed Derek's rough background and unexpected refinement might let him guide Daila gently. Her companion warns that she is misreading him and does not truly see what kind of person Derek is. He reminds her that Derek survived the streets and mercenary life long before adulthood, which kindness alone could never have accomplished. That warning unsettles Aisline. Meanwhile, Derek is escorted deeper into the annex by the old steward and a maid. He stops outside Daila's room and prepares himself before entering. His hand rises toward the door with deliberate restraint. He knocks and waits rather than barging in. When no answer comes, he remains patient. At last he opens the door. He steps inside and offers a cautious greeting. Introducing himself as Derek, he asks to be excused for intruding. Daila, the second daughter of House Duplain, tells him to come closer. He obeys and approaches her seat. A cruel smile forms before she makes her move. Without warning, she dumps filthy water over his head. Derek endures the drenching in silence. Daila mocks him, saying she mistook him for a sewer rat. She toys with the idea that he might not even be the mercenary she was told about, because he looks exactly like vermin to her. Then she climbs onto a chair to loom over him and intensify the humiliation. She literally places herself above him to assert dominance. Pouring the rest of the gutter water over him, she sneers that it suits his origins better than clean clothes ever could. Derek still refuses to react. Daila feigns disappointment that the torment ended only because she ran out of water. He remains composed, but his patience is clearly thinning. His lack of submission unsettles Daila for the first time. Enraged that he dares meet her eyes, she lashes out physically. Her kick knocks him down onto the wet floor. Even after that, she only complains that he smells foul. She covers her nose and treats him as something beneath human dignity. From the floor, Derek's expression hardens into resolve. Daila braces herself on the chair, still convinced she controls the encounter. She lectures him to know his place and mocks the idea that someone like him could ever teach her anything. At the same time, the Grand Duke's office sits under the weight of the decision Derek forced him to consider. The Grand Duke stands alone, thinking through the consequences. He recognizes that ordinary methods will never solve Daila's case. Remembering Derek's words, he accepts that the very fact a tutor like Derek is needed proves Daila's problem is severe, and he must decide how much power to give him. Derek's request was for full authority over Daila's education, not just nominal permission to teach. The Grand Duke understood exactly what that would mean. Back in the room, Daila's confidence wavers as Derek finally moves. He rises over her, no longer passive, and the balance of power abruptly shifts. Standing above her now, he prepares to enforce the boundary she refused to recognize. Daila is stunned that the prey she was tormenting has become threatening. Derek orders her to stand up. The story flashes back 3 years, to when Derek first sought guidance on how to handle a student like this. As a younger boy traveling with his teacher, Derek asks how one should teach a stubborn student who rejects kindness. His teacher first answers with idealism, saying he would try to understand and embrace such a student. Derek challenges that answer and asks what to do when even that fails. The teacher explains that teaching is about leading someone toward a better path, and when understanding fails, one must find another starting point. That starting point, he says, is fear. The harsh lesson leaves a deep impression on Derek. Returning to the present, Derek repeats the rule Daila violated and orders her again to get up and treat others with respect. Daila rises from the floor, but only to attack. She swings at him in fury rather than submit. She cannot accept that someone she despises would dare strike back or discipline her. Derek answers her violence with a slap that cuts off her outrage. He tells her plainly that he will not repeat himself and that from now on she will deal with others respectfully. Daila can only stare, shocked that anyone has ever imposed consequences on her. She immediately tries to reclaim control by screaming for the Grand Steward and accusing Derek of assaulting a noble lady. The old steward rushes in with maids, alarmed by the commotion. He starts to condemn Derek for touching Daila and warns of the Grand Duke's wrath. Derek calmly produces the written order he secured beforehand. The document states that the Grand Duke granted him full authority over every aspect of Daila's education and allowed him to use whatever methods he judged necessary. The steward is shaken when he verifies the order. Daila is left staring at proof that her father truly empowered Derek over her. Night falls over the Duplain residence as the consequences of that decision spread through the house. Valerian charges toward the annex in a rage, with Raig trying to stop him from making things worse. He bursts in and confronts the mercenary directly. Derek meets the furious noble without flinching. Valerian grabs him and demands to know how he dared strike Daila, while Raig urges him to calm down and talk first. Derek answers that he only did what the Grand Duke explicitly permitted him to do. Raig backs him up, warning Valerian that attacking Aisline's guest would only damage Aisline's standing, especially since their father approved it. Valerian finally reins himself in, orders Derek to come with him, and tells Raig to stay out of it. Once they are alone, Raig admits he heard everything and even agrees that Daila may need to be beaten into sense, assuring Derek that Valerian will not go too far. Derek turns at that remark, taking in just how twisted the Duplain family's idea of solving Daila has become. As the commander leads the white-haired boy away, Someone watching from behind scoffs that protecting Dayla is pointless. Inside the dim room, a young blonde girl startles awake as light cuts across her face. The commander opens the preserved room and invites the girl and the boy inside. He explains that this was Dayla's room in the main house, left untouched since she was driven out. The boy studies one of Dayla's unfinished landscape paintings. The commander recalls that Dayla loved drawing and used to shyly seek his praise, remembering her with tenderness. He adds that she never completed her paintings, usually leaving blank spaces and only painting what she liked. After apologizing for losing control earlier, he is told not to dwell on it. The boy asks why he was brought to this room at all. The commander says he wanted him to see that Dayla was once a child who did not deserve hatred or abuse, even if she later became consumed by bloodline obsession. He admits that obsession eventually got her expelled from the main house and confined to the annex, and he still cannot understand what changed her. The boy decides they must stop her from being sent to the monastery, believing that if she can show even basic magical ability, he can sway her father. Desperate, the commander grabs him and begs him to save Dayla. The boy halts as a new thought occurs to him. He realizes Dayla never truly abandoned magic, because the theory books in her room are covered with her notes. When he confirms those books belong to the School of Regulations, the commander explains that nobles are taught through that system. The boy silently pieces together what that means. A forest painting catches his attention as the key to Dayla's nature. He takes one of the annotated books, now convinced he has found a way forward. He agrees to try helping her. Night settles over the estate as the plan moves into action. Dayla sleeps alone, unaware of what is coming. A bucket of cold water is dumped over her to jolt her awake. She bolts up in shock, drenched and furious. The white-haired boy bluntly mocks her for nearly sleeping through this. Still disoriented, she recognizes him and demands to know if he has lost his mind. Ignoring her outrage, he orders her to come with him because there is somewhere she needs to go. He drags her through the corridor despite her screams, while the maids can only watch in alarm. Under the full moon, the night outside feels ominously open. He hauls her away from the mansion and into the grounds, forcing her farther from safety. When she resists, he knocks her down hard enough to make her cry out. She rages that this changes nothing and rejects any right he thinks he has to lecture her. He cuts through her protests and asks if she wants to hear an interesting fact. With a cold smile, he reveals that he never intended to tutor her at all and only wanted an excuse to beat arrogant nobles. His confession leaves her stunned. He presses the point, claiming no one born low has any reason to like nobles and that the tutoring was just a pretext. He singles her out as exactly the kind of noble he wants to punish. Drawing his sword, he savors the thought of noble screams. Dayla tries to threaten him with the consequences of attacking her. He dismisses the threat, saying she is headed to a monastery anyway and no one would trust her word. He goes further, saying that if things go badly he can pay with his life, because a commoner's life is worth little in this world. He even treats escape or death as trivial if it means removing a burden from the Duplain family. Dayla realizes with horror that if he catches her now, she will truly die. She bolts into the forest, deciding the open grounds would only let him catch her faster. As she runs, she resolves to lose him among the trees she knows well. She trusts the forest because she has roamed it since childhood and believes it can lead her back to safety. In panic and fury, she decides that if she can turn the situation around, he should be the one to die. Behind her, he calmly forms a blazing fireball. He launches the spell into the night, turning the chase into an execution. Dayla recognizes the attack in disbelief as a fireball. She is even more shaken when she realizes it is two-star magic, far beyond what she expected him to wield. He smiles at her fear, fully in control of the hunt. The fireball bears down on her with lethal force. For a moment she can only stare, frozen by the certainty of death. At the last instant she throws herself aside. The blast tears into the ground beside her and hurls her away in the shockwave. She survives by a hair and gasps in disbelief. He notes with amused disappointment that he missed. The moonlit forest falls silent again, making the danger feel even sharper. Bruised and shaken, she forces herself back up and keeps running. She grits through the pain, refusing to stop. A root catches her foot and breaks her stride. She crashes to the ground, losing precious time. Dazed, she struggles to rise. Before she can recover, blue mana condenses into spear-like projectiles around her. She realizes too late that another attack is already on its way. The glowing spears streak toward her from multiple angles. She braces helplessly as the trap closes in. He praises her speed, remarking that it is impressive for someone supposedly shut away all day. His words make her realize he has been reading her more closely than she thought. She runs again, but he no longer bothers to hurry after her. He watches in silence, already certain of the outcome. As exhaustion mounts, she wonders how much longer she can keep fleeing before he inevitably catches her. A sudden realization flashes across her face. He kneels and touches the ground, sensing the mana around them. The forest itself answers him with a clue. He recognizes the woods from Dayla's paintings and concludes this is the place she has known since childhood. He understands that she had been feeling the mana of the wild without knowing it, and pouring that sensation into her art. The pattern confirms his suspicion about her true magical nature. Driven into a corner, Dayla raises a rock and tries one last desperate attack. He draws his sword in a single swift motion. The blade stops her strike effortlessly before it can touch him. She is left staring at him, shocked by how completely he controls the fight. Instead of mocking her, he acknowledges her resolve and recognizes that choosing to strike back took courage. Spent and trembling, she can barely hold herself up anymore. He states the obvious at last. She no longer has the strength to run. With his sword poised above her, he asks if she has any final words. She answers with a bitter laugh rather than fear. Refusing to beg, she says she will not grovel like a commoner and tells him to kill her if he must. Instead of striking, he asks why she clings so obsessively to bloodline. The question cuts deeper than the sword ever did, and she turns away. She confesses that without her noble bloodline, she feels she would have nothing left. Her despair spills out as she fixates on magic as the one thing that could have proven her worth. Through tears, she admits the truth she has never said aloud. She never truly tried because she believed she would fail. He listens in silence, letting her finally say it. She breaks down completely, saying that no matter how hard she tries, she falls behind in both magic and painting. If even her bloodline means nothing, she no longer knows what remains of her identity. Collapsed on the ground, she asks what she even is. He pauses, no longer treating her as an enemy. Then he lowers the sword and redirects his mana. She watches through tears, unable to understand what he is doing. He says he has heard enough and abandons the threat of execution. When he says goodbye, she thinks for a heartbeat that he still means to kill her. Instead, blue power surges past her rather than into her. She squeezes her eyes shut, bracing for death that never comes. When she opens them again, confusion replaces terror. A wall of ice has risen around her, stopping the sword and danger alike. She looks up in astonishment as the frozen barrier glitters under the moon. The boy stands outside the ring of ice, having turned the attack into protection. Daila stares at her glowing hands and realizes she has just manifested mana herself. He sheathes his weapon, the lesson now complete. Bowing politely, he praises Lady Daila and apologizes for the cruelty of how he forced this breakthrough. She can only stare, still trying to understand the reversal. He explains that what she produced may be only a raw manifestation of mana rather than formal magic, but it is still proof that she can do it. The words hit her harder than any blow, and emotion catches in her throat. She bursts into tears, overwhelmed by the first real proof that she is not hopeless. He lets her cry within the ice he raised for her, no longer threatening her at all. The moon hangs over the forest as the violence gives way to revelation. Once she calms, he tells her this means she belongs to the school of the wild. He explains that nobles are usually taught through the school of regulations, even though all schools share the same foundation and differ mainly in how magic is understood and mastered. Because her temperament belongs to the wild, trying to force herself into the regulations method was doomed from the start. Still shaken, she asks how he could possibly know that about her. He answers that he saw it in the drawings she made. From those paintings, he understood that she could sense mana moving through nature and transfer that feeling onto the canvas. He adds that mages of the school of the wild usually begin by sensing the mana in nature when they are young. For the first time, she listens without resistance, trying to absorb what this means for her life. After helping her recover, he tells her she should be able to walk now. He says this is only the beginning, but promises that from tomorrow onward he will teach her how to manifest mana naturally. As he turns to leave, she stops him by name. Awkward and flustered, she manages a hesitant thank you. He accepts the gratitude with quiet restraint. The two of them walk back together through the forest, now allies instead of hunter and prey. On the way, he asks if the sunset painting in her room was hers, and when she admits it was long ago, he tells her it was beautiful enough to be a masterpiece. Morning light fills the mansion, marking the start of a different day for Daila. She wakes with new resolve and immediately begins testing the mana she discovered. A faint swirl of blue energy gathers at her fingertips as she practices alone. She focuses intensely, determined not to lose this chance. Even so, she admits to herself that controlling it is difficult. Later, a maid approaches her room carrying water, unaware of Daila's changed mood. When Daila suddenly opens the door, the startled maid spills the bucket. Water splashes across the floor in front of them. The spill reaches Daila's feet, but she remains perfectly composed. Terrified by her own mistake, the maid immediately begs forgiveness and expects punishment. Daila simply tells her to watch where she is going and walks past without striking her. The maid is left kneeling in disbelief, apologizing for a punishment that never comes. Daila leaves with calm authority instead of cruelty. The maid can barely process that Daila walked away without hurting her. As the other maids gather around, they realize something changed in Daila after last night, though none of them know what. Elsewhere, Derek sleeps peacefully after the night's ordeal. His rest ends when someone urgently calls his name, pulling him back into the next turn of the story. A white-haired young man is roused and asks what someone wants from him. Outside, Lady Daila bluntly demands that he teach her to control the mana she has finally manifested, ignoring the butler's objections. The head butler is stunned that Daila has manifested magic at all. Daila presses the issue, reminding him she was promised instruction today and insisting he stop delaying. The butler tries to put her off until the afternoon, but the closed door only hardens her mood. As the butler privately celebrates her breakthrough, Daila openly shows her impatience. She pounds on the door and orders the man inside to teach her immediately, treating refusal as an insult. Even while he lies in bed, she keeps shouting for him to open up and curses him for ignoring her. The estate settles into a new day under the weight of this unexpected development. Elsewhere in the mansion, someone strides through the halls as the news begins to spread. The servants whisper that Dahlia has suddenly stopped lashing out over small mistakes, which already feels like a miracle. The rumor grows more startling when they add that she has also manifested magic. A young noble overhears the gossip and stops in his tracks. Raig demands the servants repeat what they just said about Dahlia. The family patriarch pauses his work as the matter is brought before him. In a formal meeting, Raig reports to his father that repeated questioning of the butler and servants confirms Dahlia has manifested magic. Their father reacts with relief rather than alarm. Raig warns that one magical awakening should not erase everything Dahlia has done or automatically cancel plans to send her away. Valerian rebukes him, arguing that a sister who has manifested magic deserves praise, not condemnation. The father studies his son's opposing reactions in silence. Raig doubles down, insisting Dahlia's long record of trouble outweighs such a small result and that the convent plan should stand. Their father weighs the matter carefully instead of answering at once. The scene shifts as the family's decision gives way to Dahlia's own training. Dahlia sits alone in a sulk, hugging her knees and stewing over what she has heard. Her white-haired teacher, Derek, finds her and dryly asks whether she is sulking. Dahlia refuses that label and insists what she feels is anger. Derek tells her that acting spiteful will not change the situation. She snaps back that this is not spite but genuine anger. Derek dismisses her pouting and reminds her that the world has an order she cannot overturn by sulking. Dahlia explodes, furiously correcting him again and demanding he stop calling it pouting. Derek meets her outburst with flat, unimpressed silence. She grudgingly gives up the argument and half accepts his wording, confused by his lack of reaction. Derek calmly settles in to begin the lesson on his own terms. He warns her that newly manifested magic can backfire if used carelessly and speaks from personal experience. When he says she has rested enough and now needs to study, Dahlia mocks him as a stiff and boring magic teacher. Derek answers with a chilling suggestion that he could teach her in a far less stuffy way if she prefers. The threat conjures an image of ruthless battlefield magic, and Dahlia immediately understands he is not joking. She hastily withdraws the complaint and decides not to push him further. Derek begins properly, explaining that they will first practice magic manifestation so she can eventually learn one-star spells. He introduces the School of the Wild as a freer path of study, contrasting it with the more rigid School of Regulations. He adds that Dahlia's temperament actually suits the School of the Wild, leaving her baffled by what he means. Derek explains that her free-spirited nature fits that school well and that her Duplain blood gives her abundant talent. For perhaps the first time, Dahlia truly listens to praise about herself. She asks in disbelief whether he is really saying she is talented. Derek confirms it, pointing out that manifesting and instantly producing an ice wall is proof of exceptional ability, which makes her wonder if she is a genius. He bluntly separates talent from genius, while Dahlia stubbornly insists they are basically the same. Their bickering continues as the lesson moves forward, watched from outside by an unseen observer. Raig listens from beyond the room and clicks his tongue in irritation. Time passes at the estate as Dahlia throws herself into training. The next day, she bursts in to report that she can now manifest magic but still cannot control its direction. Another day, she proudly shows Derek a new attempt and complains that imbuing it with cold still feels wrong. By the following day, she is chasing him through the halls, saying she can sense the magic now even if the feeling is strange. Later, she even tracks him outdoors to demand attention, while he quietly reads under a tree. She scolds him for wandering from the annex, and accuses him of slacking off with the spell books their father lent him. Derek answers without shame that the books were indeed lent to him for exactly that purpose. Dahlia drags him back anyway, insisting she has finally managed to let the magic flow out properly, and wants him to verify it at once. Meanwhile, Valerian waits alone in a grand room, preparing for a private conversation. A door opens to admit the person he summoned. Valerian welcomes Derek in and invites him to sit so they can talk. He asks Derek how Dahlia has been doing lately. Derek reports that she has made real progress, though mastering one-star magic will still take more time. Valerian accepts that assessment, and warns that his mother will return next week. He cautions Derek in advance that she is not someone to underestimate, especially because nobles resent commoners holding important positions. Derek acknowledges the warning and asks if that is the real reason he was called. Valerian hesitates, choosing his words carefully. He explains that as the future head of House Duplain, he believes leadership means sincerely embracing every member of the family. He admits that this ideal is difficult because people's hearts and values differ too deeply for easy harmony. Derek asks him to stop circling the point and say what he really means. Valerian steels himself to confess something more personal. He admits with real hurt that Dahlia no longer plays with him. The childish complaint catches Derek completely off guard. Valerian nostalgically recalls how warmly Dahlia used to greet him when they were small and idealizes her as an angelic child. He then asks Derek if there is any way to win back Dahlia's favor. When Derek questions why he is asking him, Valerian blurts out that Derek is the only person Dahlia willingly follows around. Trying to prove his sincerity, Valerian stops him from leaving and reveals he even learned doll-making from the maids for Dahlia's sake. He proudly presents a handmade doll meant to resemble Daila and asks whether his brotherly love comes through. Derek stares at the grotesque result and asks if Valerian is trying to curse someone. Valerian is crushed by the verdict and realizes Derek is useless for this kind of emotional advice. Another day dawns over the estate. Derek is formally received by a refined noblewoman who says she has heard much about the capable magic teacher they found. She frames the meeting as polite interest in the man teaching Daila. Introducing herself as Miriella Dibel Duplain, she sweetly offers to send him a gift from her territory. Derek immediately refuses the implied patronage by stating he belongs to no noble house. Miriella is taken aback and asks what he means. Derek calmly reveals that he is a commoner. The revelation shocks Miriella outright. The story jumps back a week to explain how this confrontation began. When Derek first arrived at the Grand Duke's residence, a dark-haired woman named Aisline told him she was glad they had brought him there. As Daila's older sister, Aisline said she could not stay by Daila's side because duties in Ebelstein called her away, so she entrusted Daila to him. Derek accepted the responsibility with a restrained answer. Afterward, his rough mentor chided him for sounding lifeless when someone had just entrusted him with her sister. Aisline and the man urged him to finish quickly and return before Pelling caused another scene, making clear they were counting on him. Left behind at the residence, Derek watched their carriage depart in silence. Only then did Aisline realize she had forgotten to warn him about something important. She remembered too late that Valerian's mother would be returning the next week and that Derek had received no warning about her. When asked whether such a warning was really necessary, she hesitated. She struggled to describe the problem delicately. Her tension made clear the issue was serious. She finally admitted that Valerian's mother was, in effect, a god of anger and would explode over the arrangement. Back in the present, the patriarch curtly tells Miriella to lower her voice because he can hear her perfectly well. Miriella ignores the rebuke and insists the real issue is their beloved youngest daughter, Daila. The father admits he dislikes appointing commoners to important roles too, but reminds her that every high-born teacher with a respectable bloodline had already given up on Daila. Miriella refuses to accept that excuse and is appalled that they hired a former mercenary to teach her daughter. The father answers that competent magic teachers are rare and that Derek came recommended by Aisline. Miriella still insists there must be standards that cannot be compromised. She proposes summoning her younger brother Flam instead, arguing that now Daila has manifested magic he could teach her properly. The father rejects the idea, pointing out that Flam is busy managing Ebelstein and cannot be casually pulled away for private tutoring. Miriella fires back that Ebelstein's social world is just as chaotic and dangerous, so appearances there matter too. She argues that a teacher's status matters above all socially and that a nameless commoner would make Daila a laughingstock when she debuts in high society. The argument is interrupted by someone entering the room. Valerian asks his mother to calm down and reminds her she did not come back merely to fight with his father. Miriella refuses to back down, saying the real question is whether that commoner mage is truly qualified to teach Daila. Raig steps forward and pointedly asks if that is the standard she wants applied. Miriella turns to him, surprised by his intervention. Raig says that a commoner becoming a noble girl's magic teacher is unusual, but if the man truly has the necessary qualities, it need not be a major problem. He proposes to test Derek's worth himself, and begins to suggest a magic spar as the measure. Their father cuts him off, warning that Derek is a genuine mage and not someone to dismiss lightly. Raig absorbs the warning without backing down. He shifts the test, suggesting they evaluate Daila instead. Valerian watches closely, sensing where Raig is heading. Raig argues that if Derek is truly an excellent teacher, then Daila should show excellent results, so he will personally spar with her to verify that progress. The father falls silent, considering the proposal. Raig leaves before anyone can stop him, with Valerian calling after him in alarm. Valerian protests that challenging Daila to a magic spar is reckless and unreasonable. Raig asks whether Valerian truly believes Daila has changed and reminds him of everything she has done. Valerian answers that despite all of it, Daila is still their only sister and family should protect its own. Raig bitterly scoffs at that appeal to blood. He erupts that the very blood Valerian reveres is what has been dragging their house down, and that letting Daila enter society after all her behavior would ruin them. Valerian is shaken and asks if Raig truly means what he is saying. Raig coldly replies that Daila crossed the line first and that the best place for her is shut away in the annex. Valerian can only stand in stunned silence as Raig walks off. Raig leaves with a hard, resolved expression, having committed himself to forcing the issue. Outside the annex, even the birds are disturbed by the tension gathering around the coming test. Soon after, Daila bursts into Derek's room and calls for him urgently. Derek looks up from his reading and asks why she is making such a fuss so early in the morning. She throws him a rolled notice, interrupting his study with official news. Daila declares that if she loses the coming magic spar, he will be fired. Derek reads the notice and calmly points out that Raig is already an experienced one-star mage, so winning will likely be difficult for her. Daila explodes at his lack of urgency and accuses him of speaking as if he expects to be dismissed. Derek answers that he is a mercenary who simply does the job he is hired for and takes the pay that comes with it. He adds that he has already been paid more than enough, making clear he is not clinging to the position. His indifference startles Daila, and she asks whether he truly means he would leave that easily. A week later, the day of the test arrives. The estate prepares a formal outdoor arena as the family and servants gather to witness the result. The patriarch arrives with Muriella and the household, turning the spar into a public judgment. Derek appears before the patriarch, formally announcing his presence. He bows with composed professionalism rather than fear. The patriarch notices that Derek shows no nervousness at all and wonders whether that calm comes from confidence. He concludes that such nerve under pressure proves Derek is not someone they should discard lightly. As the test is about to begin, someone steps forward onto the field, signaling that the decisive confrontation is finally starting. A nobleman in a dark cape steps forward, already resolved to turn this spar into a ruthless humiliation. He makes it clear that this will not be a simple exchange of magic and that he intends to break Daiila completely. As he advances, his hatred sharpens into a promise that he will make her regret everything tied to her past. Daiila enters the arena in silence, taking her place without retreat. Behind her hood, she steadies herself and faces what is coming. Her thoughts return to Derek, and she challenges whether he truly meant that results mattered more to him than anything else. He had answered that her magical growth was finally moving properly and that even if she could not yet use one-star magic, she would soon reach it. He explained that her progress came from being born with Duplain blood, which only deepened her confusion about why he was saying this now. Derek reminded her that the School of the Wild values self-study over inherited teachings. That answer only upset her more, because it sounded like he was preparing her for separation. He hesitated, leaving the truth hanging between them. Daiila finally admitted her own weakness and addressed him with painful sincerity. Through tears, she begged to keep learning from Derek and confessed that she wanted no other teacher. Derek fell silent, taking in how desperately she meant it. He warned her that he knew nothing about noble sparring customs and had never fought under such rules. What he could teach her, he said, was how to win a real fight, and he asked whether victory was what she truly wanted. Daiila remembered the years of contempt that had defined her life, when people mocked her lack of magic and treated her as a stain on Duplain. The insults had gone beyond her, turning her existence into proof that even her family could be dragged down by her weakness. Those memories hardened her resolve, and she asked Derek to make her win. So when she came to this duel, she did not stand there as Raig's little sister. She also refused to stand there merely as the youngest child of House Duplain. She stood there only as Derek's student, and as a mage determined to prove herself. The house banner flies above the arena as the formal match begins. Daiila and Raig face each other across the platform, the distance between them charged with family pride and personal grievance. An official clears his throat to announce the terms. He declares that they will follow the Kelbram Salon's high-rank sparring rules, where the first side to trigger General Pelham's protective magic circle loses. Raig accepts the rules and calls for the duel to begin. Daiila answers with a calm, focused stare instead of fear. The protective charm around each duelist is explained as a costly accessory that activates just before serious damage and nullifies the decisive blow. Watching from the side, Derek notes how nobles hide danger behind expensive safeguards and guesses Raig plans to finish the match quickly. Raig immediately launches into incantations and gathers green mana into a fast-moving attack. Daiila does not panic as the first spell closes in. She raises her hand and answers with raw control rather than a formal spell. Raig continues chanting while inwardly dismissing her as someone who belongs back in confinement. He sends a sweeping strike across the arena, expecting to overwhelm her before she can react. A voice cries out for Daiila as the attack bears down on her. She tracks the spell with sudden clarity. Instead of meeting it head-on, she slips past its path with a sharp, efficient dodge. Raig is offended that she would answer his magic with movement and nerve rather than proper decorum. He redirects the attack, trying to force it back onto her. The curved spell chases her through the air as he tries to make accuracy substitute for skill. Daiila studies the attack even while evading it. Derek realizes Raig can cast one-star magic easily but fights like a novice, wasting mana by forcing the spell's trajectory. Daiila answers by raising a wall of ice directly into the attack's path. The ice barrier surges up around her, turning defense into terrain. Raig scoffs that she is not even using star-ranked magic, only brute magical manifestation, and assumes it cannot truly stop him. To crush her resistance, he creates multiple green projectiles at once. He decides to overwhelm her with sheer firepower and dares her to block everything. From behind the ice, Daiila watches him prepare a barrage instead of retreating. Derek's lessons echo back to her that mercenaries do not worship fairness, only victory. He had warned that this kind of fight would look ugly by noble standards and might draw criticism even if she won. But he also told her that a winning ending could still be created if she accepted that reality. Daiila had accepted that without hesitation. Now she steadies herself and commits fully to that path. She runs through the shattered field as Raig's attacks rain down around her. Derek's teaching returns again. The fighters who win despite weaker strength are the ones who turn the battlefield itself into a weapon. They do not duel politely. They fight to control every advantage. Raig braces himself, trying to keep his casting rhythm while the terrain grows hostile. Daiila slams power into the platform and uses the structure itself as part of her attack. She embraces the mercenary principle of using any available method to seize victory. She waits for the instant his guard drops during incantation and strikes at that opening instead of his pride. Her ice tears through the platform from below, shattering the ground under him. Daila pushes through the debris, refusing to let the chance slip away. Reg thinks the match is finished and assumes she has already been beaten. Daila realizes he still has not understood where the real threat is coming from. Another attack sweeps over the broken platform while she remains just outside its reach. The arena erupts in dust and splintered wood, hiding her movement. Derek watches without alarm, as if he expected her to reach exactly this point. From the stands, her mother panics and calls out Daila's name. She begs for the spar to be stopped, convinced Daila has been hurt. But the family patriarch orders her to sit and insists the duel is not over. When she protests that Daila was clearly hit, he points out that the protective circle never activated, meaning no decisive blow landed. That answer leaves him watching more carefully. Derek remains seated, following the battle in silence. He notes that Reg never even flinched, which means he had already anticipated Daila's growth to some extent. Reg searches the wrecked platform, trying to recover control. He cannot understand why the protective charm stayed silent, and where Daila disappeared to. Then he finally notices her below the platform, looking up from the hole she created. Before he can react, the damaged floor gives way under his feet. A rising pillar of ice blasts him off balance and throws him backward. He crashes down hard, stripped of the composure he started with. Realizing she is attacking from beneath the platform, he sees too late that she has changed the battlefield entirely. He protests inwardly that leaving the platform should count as a loss, but the rules offer him no rescue. The official remains unreadable, giving him no support. Reg bitterly understands that noble rules never imagined anyone would use such a dirty but legal tactic. He regains his footing amid the wreckage and prepares to continue. Ice spikes erupt around him again, hemming him in and forcing him to move where Daila wants. He runs through the narrowing lane she creates, no longer dictating the pace. Unable to see her, he realizes the pressure has reversed and that she now needs only one clean hit while he cannot target her at all. He recognizes with growing anger that this has become a true fight, stripped of noble etiquette. He calls for Daila, trying to draw her out. She answers only by staring up at him from the darkness below, calm and relentless. Her eyes burn with the same cold resolve that once belonged to Derek. Reg suddenly recognizes that expression and remembers seeing it on Derek when threatened before. That realization unsettles him more than the ice itself. He concludes that Daila could never have devised this alone and blames Derek for turning her into this kind of opponent. Deciding to stop playing by appearances, he strips away his cape to move freely. The discarded cloak falls between the ice pillars as he prepares a harsher response. He resolves to answer her scheme with one of his own. Standing amid the shattered arena, he gathers himself for a desperate counter. From above, Daila's mother is horrified to realize her daughter has gone down into the broken space beneath the platform. She begs again for the fight to end, but the patriarch refuses because the rules still technically hold. Even he begins to think more carefully about what he is seeing. Below the platform, Daila crouches among broken beams and ice, listening rather than rushing blindly. She focuses and begins to read the battle through sensation instead of sight. She identifies the flow of mana moving above her. At the same time, Reg starts another spell and suddenly senses that she is tracking him through his mana. He stumbles as the unstable footing and her pressure disrupt his casting. He realizes she is timing every attack for the moment he begins an incantation and panics at the thought of losing that way. His fear sharpens into a reckless decision. He looks up and notices the tall flagpole anchored into the ruined platform. Daila senses the mana flow stop and immediately understands that he is changing tactics. She decides that whatever he tries next, she must strike the instant he starts another cast. The official addresses Reg uneasily as the young noble moves beyond normal sparring conduct. Reg climbs the flagpole to gain height and distance, escaping the blind zone Daila created. From above, he reasons that she should not be able to react to his mana at that range, though casting from there is still difficult. He finds a single brutal solution and channels power without relying on a formal incantation. He decides to destroy the entire platform itself, forcing the battlefield to collapse around her. Derek watches this escalation with a hard, unreadable expression. The platform splits under the impact as lightning-like force tears through its supports. The flagpole itself snaps loose in the destruction. Reg is thrown from his perch as the structure gives way beneath him. The whole arena erupts in a massive cloud of debris and dust. From the stands, Daila's mother cries out in terror for Reg as well now that the destruction threatens everyone involved. Reg lands hard but manages to survive the collapse. Bruised and breathing hard, he tries to recover his bearings through the dust. A shadow suddenly rushes through the smoke toward him. He reacts instantly and forms a magic arrow at close range, aiming to finish her before she can reach him. The arrow shoots forward in a straight killing line. Daila sees it too late to avoid cleanly. She twists her body and throws up her arm, taking the hit through sheer will. The magic tears into her hand and arm, freezing and damaging them as she forces the attack off course. Pain flashes across her face, but she does not stop. The deflected arrow spins away instead of piercing her through. It passes behind her as she keeps charging straight at him. Even wounded, she closes the remaining distance before he can reset. Reg thinks he still has the advantage at close range and needs only one more arrow to end it. Daila answers that thought with a brutal physical strike, driving her boot into his chest. The impact shocks them both, but it is Raig who is left gasping beneath her. He collapses to one knee, clutching his chest as the breath is knocked out of him. Desperate, he grabs a handful of dirt from the ruined ground. Daila sees the motion and swings through with everything she has left. Raig flings sand into her face, blinding her for an instant and buying himself space. She recoils upward through the broken ceiling while he shields his eyes and snarls at her persistence. He realizes she has exhausted her mana and is now relying on kicks, dirt, and raw desperation just to keep a chance at winning. At last he acknowledges her resolve and reframes the duel as a test of her worth rather than a simple punishment. He silently vows that if she is this determined, he must answer her with equal seriousness as her brother. For a moment the bright sky hangs over the ruined arena like a pause before the next exchange. When the dust settles, Daila stands again facing Raig, both battered and still in the fight. Holding her injured head and glaring forward, Daila refuses to yield despite the pain and the ruin around her. A wounded blonde girl in red steadies herself as blood runs down her face, setting a tense and painful mood. Her teacher begins explaining magic through a simple metaphor, asking her to think of it as painting. He reframes spellcasting as shaping mana with intent, like using a brush to move paint. The lesson continues. A mage gathers loose mana and arranges it into a complete form. Under the night sky, the white-haired teacher demonstrates that principle directly for her. He names the result plainly, making her realize that this act of shaping mana is what magic truly is. The idea hits Daila with sudden clarity and awe. As she watches the glowing trail in the sky, the abstract lesson becomes something she can finally grasp. Remembering her battered state, she turns inward and focuses despite the pain and humiliation she has endured. She begins repeating the lesson to herself, accepting that spells are only tools for directing mana. Following that understanding, she lets mana gather around her body and hands. She senses mana at her fingertips and decides to draw with it herself. Her hesitation hardens into conviction as she fully understands what magic requires. That realization manifests into a real spell, and an ice spear forms beside her. An older onlooker is stunned by what he is seeing. Daila's mother recognizes the feat at once and realizes her daughter has just used one-star magic. Her opponent, Raig, is shaken but immediately identifies the spell and accepts that Daila has caught up to him. Daila holds her new magic with surprising composure, no longer looking like a helpless novice. Raig refuses to yield and prepares his own attack first. He convinces himself that even if Daila has reached the same rank, he still has the advantage in speed and experience. Betting everything on striking first, he commits to an all-out attack. Daila answers by directing her spear with calm focus instead of panic. Raig launches his magic forward, trying to overwhelm her before she can respond. The two attacks race toward collision. A violent impact tears through the training ground. Daila's mother cries out, fearing the worst for her daughter. When the dust clears, a protective barrier is visible at the center of the blast. The barrier absorbs the force and keeps the attack from reaching Daila. Raig realizes what happened as he catches his breath in the cold aftermath. Daila also understands that something protected her at the crucial moment. Her teacher watches in silence, calm and unreadable. The story shifts back to the beginning of this relationship, 1 year earlier. At the Duplain estate, ordinary life continues quietly before the conflict that will follow. A letter arrives at the estate concerning an upcoming social gathering. The household head is informed and asked how he wants the matter handled. He notices Daila isolated and withdrawn in another room. She sits alone, tense and guarded, already carrying the weight of her circumstances. Her father studies her in silence, measuring her state rather than comforting her. The memory returns to her injured face, linking that lonely girl to the present ordeal. Back in the duel, the barrier still stands around Daila while the attack rages outside it. Daila realizes the barrier activated on its own to protect her. Raig is left kneeling amid the wreckage, his attack spent and his advantage gone. The teacher quietly accepts the outcome. Raig admits defeat to himself. Daila finally breaks down, releasing all the fear and pressure she had been holding back. From above, her father observes the ruined field and the result of the match. Her mother reacts with disgust, insisting that what Daila used cannot be considered proper noble magic. Daila stands crying and hurt, while being judged instead of comforted. Her father questions how a mere tutor could have taught something so improper to a Duplain daughter. A memory surfaces of Raymond Oswald Duplain presenting himself proudly as a noble warrior before a superior. He was once told that he resembled his father, and carried the same ambition. He accepted that praise eagerly, revealing how deeply ambition defines him. In the present, Daila wipes at her tears and tries to regain control. Her father notes that the look in her eyes has changed, seeing growth where others only saw disgrace. The servants rush to Daila in concern as she struggles to stand. They urge her to get treatment immediately, but Daila resists being led away. Instead, she turns back toward Raig, unwilling to leave the result unresolved. Raig awkwardly faces her, unsure how to respond now that he has lost. He offers clumsy praise, embarrassed but sincere. The maids try again to escort Daila away while Raig lingers in the background, still flustered. Daila ignores them and keeps moving with a fixed purpose. She goes straight to her teacher rather than to safety or treatment. He waits for her without interrupting, letting her speak first. Daila lowers her head, ashamed and overwhelmed. She struggles to force the words out through tears. At last she confesses that she lost. She apologizes as if she has failed him personally. He listens without judgment. Then he moves closer and gently reassures her. He tells her that losing is acceptable. More importantly, he urges her to use this frustration as fuel to grow stronger. His words catch her off guard because they offer encouragement instead of blame. The relief breaks her composure, and she cries openly in front of him. The servants watch anxiously as Daila clings to that small kindness. Her mother approaches after seeing this exchange. She calls for Daila sharply, reclaiming authority over the situation. Yet when she reaches her daughter, her tone softens into grief and concern for what Daila has suffered. She embraces Daila and tells her to stop enduring it alone and get treated first. Daila accepts that comfort at last. As the maids lead Daila away, her mother watches with tears in her eyes. She is left shaken and conflicted by what has happened. The teacher turns to leave quietly, expecting no further place in the family's affairs. But Daila's mother stops instead of following her daughter. He notices her hesitation and waits. She suddenly unleashes her anger on him, accusing him of corrupting Daila with vulgar tricks. He remains composed even as she closes in on him. She insists he taught Daila something dirty and unworthy of a noble lady. He does not flinch under the attack. She argues that someone of his station cannot understand the dignity nobles must protect. Trying to justify herself, she appeals to her husband and claims Daila was taught something shameful rather than magical. But her certainty falters when she senses the room turning against her. Her husband rebukes her, pointing out that her public outburst is the truly vulgar behavior. She cannot understand why he would defend a commoner over noble pride. He answers that the teacher may be a commoner, but he is still their daughter's teacher. By framing the issue that way, he exposes how disgraceful her treatment of him has been. He asks the teacher to forgive her, excusing it as a parent's distorted way of loving a child. The teacher stays silent, weighing the situation. He accepts the apology, and is then invited to a private audience. The father leads him away while the mother is left stunned by how events have turned. She remains rattled, unable to reconcile her outrage with her husband's decision. In the audience room, the father begins by praising how well Daila has been raised and taught. He presents himself as a generous lord ready to reward that success. Then he reveals the bait he prepared specifically for the teacher: access to 3-star magic. The offer lands exactly where he intended. The teacher immediately recognizes the danger of dealing with a 5-star mage and Grand Duke who understands people too well. Even so, he decides that an opportunity like this cannot be ignored. The father acknowledges the teacher's skill but says 1-star instruction alone is not enough for Daila to survive noble society. The teacher argues that now that Daila has found the feel for magic, many others could guide her further. The father rejects that idea, saying Daila does not merely need instruction but a true teacher. He punctuates the point with deliberate calm, keeping the teacher under pressure. Then he names the teacher's hidden ambition outright, saying a commoner like him is not even supposed to dream so high. He makes clear that he knows exactly how insulting noble limits must feel to someone with that hunger. He also shows that he understands the teacher aims beyond 3-star magic, toward far greater heights. That insight makes the father even more dangerous, because he is not merely powerful but perceptive. He concludes that a man with such ambition is already preparing to leave this estate eventually. The teacher admits it, but the father still asks him to remain and teach Daila a little longer. The teacher keeps hearing the temptation repeated in his mind: the highest realm a commoner is allowed to touch. The father presses the offer once more, forcing a decision. This time the teacher openly accepts, driven by his desire for higher magic. Soon after, a door opens onto a hidden library prepared for him. He is brought into a private archive filled with rare spellbooks. He immediately begins searching through the collection with focused hunger. The books contain advanced magical formulas and diagrams far beyond what he has had access to before. He is momentarily speechless at the scale of what has been placed before him. Then he quietly admits how extraordinary the reward is. He realizes this room is filled entirely with 3-star spellbooks, treasures many mages would never obtain even once in a lifetime. Holding one of them, he understands just how much the Grand Duke is investing in him. That reward gives him more than enough reason to remain at the estate for now. He also worries that another woman in his life, Pelin, would be furious if she learned he had chosen to stay. Time passes under a bright sky, easing the tension after the duel. Recovered and proud, Daila announces that she is now a 1-star mage. Her teacher dryly confirms that using 1-star magic once disqualify her, at least technically. Daila is offended that he treats her breakthrough so casually and demands proper recognition. He reminds her that real mastery is difficult, while noting she has recovered well over the last 3 days. He also teases her for how hard she cried after the duel. Embarrassed, she loudly denies it and claims it was only dust in her eyes. She admits she had feared he would be thrown out because of what happened. Instead, he calmly resumes their lessons and tells her she is progressing fast enough to learn the rest of the 1-star spells soon. Daila immediately latches onto the word fast and demands an explanation. He explains that reaching 1-star magic so soon after her magic manifested is unusually rapid growth. Excited, she starts listing flashy spells she wants to learn next, from magic arrows to wind blades. She even dreams of mastering the ice spear that impressed her so much, but he cuts her off and redirects her training. When he says they will practice magic manifestation instead of more spells, she is baffled and disappointed. He explains that although there are many reasons, the most important thing is always the basics. Reducing it to fundamentals, he says it all comes down to mana, and she reluctantly agrees to follow his lead. Still pouting, she accepts his explanation while grumbling that she got excited for nothing. Her frustration lingers, but she remains attentive. Noticing him staring thoughtfully, she asks why he is looking at her that way. He answers that he is simply surprised to see her obey so readily, ending the scene on a teasing note as their lessons continue. Daila indignantly insists she has honored Derek's guidance from the very start. Derek quietly challenges that claim by recalling how things truly began. He reminds her that her first response to him was humiliating him with dirty water more than once. Embarrassed, Daila admits those insults were impossible for him to forget. He goes on to remember her as a reckless girl who laughed at everything and cared only about rushing off to magic practice. Even then, he had already seen her as wild and unruly. The memory gives way to a later night at the ducal estate. After exhausting herself with magic, Daila lies in the grass trying to catch her breath. Derek approaches and notes that her life is about to become much busier. As he sits beside her, she confirms she has heard the news too. She explains that starting next week she will be forced into etiquette and general education classes on top of magic. Derek treats that as natural progress, but Daila bitterly asks whether he really thinks she should be happy about it. She lists the endless noble subjects awaiting her, and cannot understand why she must learn any of them, wondering how Aisline endured such a life. Derek answers that this discipline is exactly why Aisline became the celebrated flower of Duplain and a central figure in high society. Daila confesses she wants only to study magic, and Derek tells her to keep doing so because his position in the house gives them room to maneuver, though she doubts they truly have much time. He asks whether anyone could still force him out now. Daila warns that while her father has acknowledged Derek, her mother will not quietly accept it. When Derek asks why the madam wants him gone, Daila guesses her mother fears Derek will pull her away from noble dignity and turn her into a mercenary like him. Derek dismisses that accusation, saying the kind of dignity nobles praise is far removed from what he saw in their sparring. He bluntly concludes that such dignity is nothing special. Then he tells Daila that silencing her mother is simpler than she thinks if they remove the excuse being used against him. Daila pauses, trying to understand what he means. Morning comes over the ducal estate. Inside the mansion, Daila's mother broods while the household goes about its work. She convinces herself that her daughter has fallen under the influence of an indecent teacher, and pities Daila as a victim. In her mind, Derek is nothing but a crude mercenary teaching Daila the ways of violence. She imagines Daila barging into noble society in disgrace, dragging that vulgar influence with her. The thought gives her a headache rather than comfort. She reaffirms that regardless of her husband's approval, she still rules the estate, and refuses to accept Derek's place in it. Determined, she vows to find some way to drive him out. Before she can act, Daila appears and greets her warmly as mother. The madam is momentarily disarmed by the affectionate, graceful daughter she once claimed to cherish. For a moment she can only stare in silence. Her confusion deepens as she realizes this behavior is not an act she expected. Daila, now dressed and composed like a proper young lady, politely asks whether her mother rested well. The madam is visibly shaken by the sudden refinement. Daila apologizes for not visiting sooner because she had been recovering in the annex, says she wants to talk more later, and explains she must leave for a piano lesson. Caught off guard, her mother can only stammer out a reply. Daila adds that she has to go first because her general education schedule is already packed. Still trying to regain control, her mother asks whether etiquette lessons have even begun yet, and points out they should not start until next week. Daila calmly agrees and thanks her mother for arranging them, saying she is looking forward to the lessons. The answer leaves the madam with nothing to oppose except a weak order to hurry along. As Daila walks away across the courtyard, the servants watch the exchange. A maid drops what she is carrying in surprise at how different Daila has become. Instead of lashing out, Daila gently checks whether the maid is hurt, and tells her not to overwork herself. The maid can barely believe she is being treated with such kindness. Daila leaves the courtyard, and the servants continue staring after her. Word soon spreads through the noble district that Rosia Salon has been full of laughter again. At a tea gathering, Aisline is told that she had seemed burdened by worry at the last event. Aisline lightly brushes it off and apologizes for causing concern. She says most of what troubled her has now been resolved and that she feels much better. Elant of House Belmiard admits she had been alarmed by rumors that Aisline left the noble district to save someone. Aisline explains that she had gone personally to find a magic teacher for her younger sister Daila. That revelation startles the others, who realize Aisline herself searched for this teacher. Denise of House Veltius repeats the surprising point that Daila is Aisline's younger sister. Aisline confirms it, and says Daila has become so proper that she was hard to recognize. She proudly adds that Daila has manifested one-star magic and now carries herself with remarkable composure. The other girls privately wonder why Aisline is openly speaking of a sister the family once kept hidden. Aisline praises the teacher as a man without status but with extraordinary ability, and reveals she found him in person at the Beldon Mercenary Corps. The word mercenary immediately changes the mood. Elant grows tense as the implications sink in. She starts connecting this teacher to Daila's past notoriety. Elant remembers that Daila's reputation once drove even her family's cook away from Duplain, making the current praise hard to reconcile. Still, she cannot ignore that this same teacher somehow reformed Daila and awakened her magic. Her curiosity sharpens into interest. Elant asks Aisline for the teacher's name. She frames it as simple curiosity about a man who is bound to become famous if he is truly Daila's teacher. Aisline answers without hesitation that his name is Derek. She adds that Derek has even been helping her with etiquette, because such things are difficult to learn alone. Back at the mansion, Daila's mother forces out praise for Daila's self-study. Daila immediately corrects her and says Derek taught her, asking what exactly had been so difficult when she was left to learn alone. Daila cheerfully admits nearly everything was difficult and says whatever progress she has made is thanks to Derek. Her mother smiles on the surface while inwardly seething at hearing Derek's name yet again. Alone, the madam rages that Derek's influence keeps surfacing no matter what she does. She admits she does not know how he changed Daila, but becomes more determined to find a way around it. Meanwhile, the servants begin openly remarking that Daila has become gentle and considerate toward them. Even the gardener notes that her mood has been bright, and that she has changed dramatically in only a few weeks. The head butler is struck by how familiar that refined demeanor feels. The madam hears someone say Daila now carries true noble dignity, and the comparison only fuels her resentment. Night falls again over the estate. Outside, Derek studies a high-level spell book under the moonlight. He pushes himself hard enough that the strain shows on his face. Blue mana swirls around him as he forces the spell into shape. He steadies his breathing and focus with a practiced trick. His hand continues guiding the mana through a precise pattern. The effort finally throws him off balance, and he drops back to the ground, exhausted. He catches his breath, frustrated but still intent on mastering it. Valerian arrives and apologizes for interrupting what he assumes is training. Derek says it is no problem and asks why Valerian came. The night settles as they prepare for a more personal conversation. Valerian says he wants to talk about Daila, and Derek agrees to listen. Before getting to the point, Valerian notices Derek is studying from a 3-star spell book and learns the Duke lent it to him. That level of trust surprises Valerian. Derek explains that although the book is beyond him for now, there is value in studying ahead. Valerian recalls his father's judgment that Derek is a true mage, not merely a mercenary. He can only admit how impressive that is. Derek brings the conversation back to Daila and asks what Valerian wanted to say. Valerian awkwardly admits the matter is complicated and blurts out that he does not even know what girls Daila's age like. Derek waits for him to explain himself properly. Valerian wonders if a doll embroidered to resemble Daila might make a good gift. Derek immediately rejects the idea as a terrible one. Valerian laughs off the suggestion, saying he expected that answer and had no real intention of making something so absurd. He tries to end the embarrassment by suggesting they head back inside. The two leave the training spot and walk together across the grounds. As they go, Valerian unexpectedly thanks Derek. He explains that the household atmosphere has improved, he has been able to focus on governing, and even their father seems quietly satisfied. Derek notes that the Duke's feelings are hard to read, but Valerian says everyone in the mansion can see the difference. Valerian slows, thinking seriously about what has changed. He admits he is finally accepting that people can change, especially children still growing up. He is unsure whether he failed to notice Daila's change or simply avoided it, but now wants to change himself as well. He tells Derek that this shift is thanks to him and offers sincere gratitude. Derek receives the thanks in silence, unable to answer easily. Valerian then mentions that Daila's magic felt different from ordinary magic and asks whether Derek noticed it too. Derek reflects that only a true genius would notice such a subtle distinction. He confirms that Daila uses the mana operation of the School of the Wild, a rare style Valerian has at least heard of. Derek explains that every person handles mana differently, and once Daila fully finds her own path she will no longer need him to teach her. At that stage, he says, a teacher's interference would only hold her back. Valerian repeats the idea of that future level, and Derek quietly says Daila's time to shine will come. 2 months pass. One day a maid brings Daila fresh flowers for her hair, saying they bloomed beautifully and seemed suited to her. Daila enjoys their scent and remarks that life has felt like spring for months now. She reflects that she is now comfortable even with 1-star magic and has grown much closer to the servants. Looking back, she realizes how much she had been missing all this time and credits Derek for opening that world to her. The maid teases that Daila seems especially happy today and guesses it must be because it is a magic lesson day. Daila brightens and asks for one leftover flower so she can give it to Derek as well. The flower slips from the maid's hand before it can be passed to her. It falls to the floor as if foreshadowing something breaking. Daila freezes, suddenly uneasy. A moment later she hears Derek's voice from another room and demands to know what he means. She finds Derek standing before the Duke, and Derek confirms that she heard him correctly. He tells Daila there is nothing left for him to teach her. The narration compares their situation to the seasons, saying spring cannot last forever any more than winter can. Derek explains to the Duke that Daila belongs to the School of the Wild and that her natural trait is especially strong. He believes that if he stays involved any longer, he will only clip the wings she needs to spread on her own. The Duke accepts that reasoning and concludes there is no longer any reason for Derek to remain in the mansion. For a beat, either man says more. The Duke rises, making the decision final while Derek lowers his gaze. Then the Duke acknowledges that Derek changed many things and helped his daughter grow. He admits he had been so consumed by ruling the territory that he failed as a father, but says he is relieved now. After a long pause, he asks Derek when he plans to leave. Derek says he has heard Aisline will visit soon and return to Ebelstein, and he intends to depart in her carriage then. The Duke tells him to return the library key, and Derek says he will send back the spell books he is reading and pass the key through the head butler. The Duke cuts him off and orders him to return the key immediately. Derek stiffens at the sudden severity. The Duke ends the audience by saying Derek may go if there is nothing else. Derek hesitates, still holding back what he really feels. The Duke turns away while Derek places a hand to his chest and quietly accepts the dismissal. He leaves the room alone, carrying the weight of the decision with him. In the corridor, Delilah stops him and accuses him of appearing in her life without warning only to disappear just as suddenly. Derek can only face her and address her formally, unable yet to answer the hurt in her eyes. Derek accepts that he cannot stay, but he still chooses to say a proper farewell to Delilah. Unable to hide her feelings any longer, Delilah quietly asks him not to leave. He hesitates for a moment, clearly affected by her plea. Even so, he starts to walk away from the life he has had here. He explains that he is returning to his old path as a mercenary, will keep studying magic, and expects Delilah to continue growing until her debut in Ebelstein. His words leave her hurt, but she listens instead of stopping him. He softens the parting by promising they can meet again in Ebelstein, and by then he hopes to be strong enough to teach her more. Delilah calls him infuriating because he always leaves her with nothing to argue against. That night passes under the looming weight of the mansion and their coming separation. Later, Delilah jolts awake in distress, gasping from a terrible dream. The nightmare drags her back to the cruelty she endured as a child, when everyone around her called her useless and talentless despite her bloodline. The memory reaches its cruelest point with the claim that she should never have been born. The old wound still strikes her with the same shock as if it were happening again. She cries out in her sleep, rejecting those words even now. Alone in her room, she struggles to steady herself after the nightmare. Once she regains her senses, she realizes it was only a dream, though the fear lingers. Her maid rushes in after hearing the scream and fears something is seriously wrong. Delilah is asked what happened, but she cannot immediately answer. Instead, a dangerous thought begins to form in her mind. She considers faking another outburst and returning to the spoiled, violent behavior she once used to keep Derek near her. But the thought collapses when she admits to herself that Derek would not stay for her that way anymore. The maid keeps checking on her, worried that she is ill. Delilah stops herself before saying anything reckless. She decides she will not go back to those ugly methods again. So she smiles and reassures the maid, while privately accepting that forcing people to stay will never make her truly valuable. Morning comes, and the day of departure arrives. A carriage is prepared, and Derek is offered a ride into the commercial district on his way out. One of the household women tells him to say his goodbyes quickly because they will be leaving soon. Derek turns toward the people he is about to leave behind. The household gathers to see him off, including Delilah and the men who have watched over the estate. When asked if he is truly leaving, Derek answers that he must return to where he originally came from. The others acknowledge how hard his time in the mansion must have been and promise help if he ever needs it. Derek thanks them, though he remains emotionally restrained. He falls silent when his gaze settles on Delilah. Delilah meets that silence with one of her own, refusing to make this easy. Her stare unsettles him enough that he asks what she means by it. She makes it clear she is not going to beg him to stay and insists he should not mistake her for a child anymore. Derek answers with sincerity, saying it was an honor to teach her and that he hopes she will remember the magic they learned together. She immediately rejects his modesty and declares that she will proudly call him her teacher no matter what trouble that causes him. For once, Derek has no ready response to her bold affection and trust. Delilah waits, vulnerable beneath her pride. What finally comes out is a clumsy warning for him to stay safe and not throw himself into needless danger, while he asks her not to overwork herself either. She doubles down on her claim that she is already grown and can take care of herself now. Her words trigger a memory in Derek. He remembers his own younger self insisting the same thing, trying to survive by pretending he needed no one. That memory carries the warmth of someone who once held him close. He recalls being told by a woman named Peric to truly take those words to heart. The memory leaves him quiet and reflective. Back in the present, he addresses Delilah with unusual gentleness. He tells her she does not need to force herself to become an adult so quickly. That kindness finally breaks through her composure, and tears begin to gather. As he turns away to leave, she raises a trembling hand after him. She calls his name one last time, making him stop. This time she chooses hope over restraint, and tells him they will meet again. He answers her from a distance, accepting that promise as he continues on. He says they should meet again in Ebelstein, and through tears Delilah agrees. The farewell ends beneath an open sky that feels both bright and painfully empty. Derek returns to Ebelstein's commercial district, back to the rough world he came from. The familiar streets and doors of his old life come back into view. Inside, the place is as violent and lawless as ever, with a man being beaten on the floor. The crowd eggs the attackers on, treating brutality as entertainment. The victim is struck again, while no one intervenes. A blonde young woman notices Derek's arrival and calls out to him at once. Derek answers that he has finally come home. He has returned to the tavern called Beldenstyr, the base of his old companions. The tavern owner welcomes him back with honey wine, remembering that Derek used to love it. The blonde woman Pelin immediately comments on how pale he looks after living among nobles. The owner jokes that when he heard Derek had become a magic teacher for nobles, it sounded too absurd to believe, and he demands the full story. Derek brushes it off, saying he merely worked there and that there is little worth telling. Pelin mocks how formal he sounds now and refuses to let him stay evasive. The owner cuts her off, but she vents that she had to struggle through everything alone while Derek was gone. The owner turns practical and asks whether Derek at least earned good money from the nobles. Derek answers that what he received there mattered more than money. To explain himself, he places a valuable spell book on the table. The others are stunned and immediately recognize it as something extraordinarily rare, possibly even beyond what they expected. Derek calmly clarifies that it is a 3-star spellbook. That revelation throws the tavern into chaos, with panic over theft mixing with greed and envy. Derek silences the speculation by stating that the Grand Duke gave it to him personally. Pelin refuses to believe him and instantly starts asking whether the nobles need an archery instructor too. Time passes, and the tavern settles into another night. Soon after returning, Derek is already asking whether any new jobs have come in. He says he wants something light, just enough to shake off the softness he feels he gained while living safely. The owner laughs off the idea that Derek could ever truly lose his edge and reminds him there is always work for a mage. Derek insists on starting immediately, without wasting even a day. Before long, he is back on the road with Pelin, carrying the spellbook and returning to mercenary life. Their work quickly turns dangerous when Pelin is chased by a monstrous attacker in the wild. The two of them bring the creature down together, with Pelin handling the bow and Derek finishing it at close range. They continue taking on deadly jobs, even fighting through nests of giant spiders while Derek channels magic through his blade. During travel, Derek studies the spellbook whenever he has a spare moment, while Pelin watches him with disbelief. At night, even camp is brief and practical, with little comfort between assignments. When the others sleep, Derek keeps training alone under the night sky. He pushes his mana control further, forcing himself through difficult practice. He concentrates power into a crystal-like core between his hands, trying to stabilize a higher-level spell. The attempt detonates violently and throws him backward. The blast tears through the forest, showing just how dangerous the spell is. Bruised and coughing, Derek admits he has mostly mastered 2-star magic, but 3-star spells are still far beyond him. The spellbook itself confirms how much more complex the next level is. Seasons pass as he keeps studying and working, yet the barrier to 3-star magic remains frustratingly high. Autumn arrives over Beldenstyr, marking the steady passage of time. Winter follows, and Derek is still taking jobs despite the brutal cold. One snowy night, the tavern door opens again to the storm outside. Pelin complains bitterly about the freezing weather as they return from another mission. The owner marvels that they went all the way to the Ken Mountains and back in such conditions, while Pelin grumbles that Derek never waits for better weather. The owner notes that only people as reckless as them would bring back a harpy's head in the middle of winter. Derek thanks him while pressing a bloodied cloth to his face, and the danger seems to have revived him rather than worn him down. Seeing that Derek still wants more, the owner mentions a new request that suits him perfectly. He describes it as easy and profitable, though mildly troublesome. The job comes from the Rohel Mercenary Corps in West Street. As Derek heads there, the details continue to unfold. A noble named Count Belmiar needs a commoner mage to serve as a target during magic sparring, essentially a disposable punching bag. The job sounds simple on paper: endure a few hits and get paid. At the noble's sparring grounds, an elderly instructor and a red-haired noblewoman arrive to begin the session. The noblewoman asks who her opponent will be, and the instructor explains that a commoner has been hired for her offensive magic practice. She is openly offended that she is being told to beat up a commoner for training. The instructor coldly insists that this too is part of her education and reminds her the commoner has been paid well for it. She agrees with contempt, dismissing the whole arrangement as typical noble cruelty. Even so, she notes that the hired commoner can supposedly withstand 1-star magic, while she herself is on the verge of reaching 2-star and wonders whether the gap is too great. Nearby, Derek quietly prepares himself and listens to everything. When the moment comes, he steps forward to announce himself. The red-haired noblewoman asks if he is the one hired to spar with her. He introduces himself formally as Derek. She gives her name as Elant, and his name stirs a vague sense of recognition in her. She decides to proceed anyway, though she privately questions why such a young-looking commoner is being used for this. Before starting, Elant loosens up and prepares to cast. She checks whether Derek at least knows the basic rules of magic sparring. He answers that he knows the fundamentals. Satisfied, she tells him to resist as much as he can because she intends to finish quickly. Privately, she decides the fastest and least troublesome way is to blast him out of bounds with a shockwave. Derek takes her instruction literally and asks exactly how much resistance she wants from him. The question catches her off guard as absurd. He calmly explains that he needs a clear measure so he can be genuinely useful to her training. The instructor says nothing, but his silence shows he is paying close attention now. Elant finds Derek's manner unexpectedly amusing. Still smiling, she repeats that he should resist with everything he has. Derek accepts that answer without hesitation. He gathers blue mana around his hand and prepares to answer her seriously. Both of them enter a real combat stance, and the sparring instantly stops, looking one-sided. Elant begins casting while thinking that Derek is impressive for a commoner who mastered one-star magic so young, yet she still believes nobles and commoners stand on opposite sides of an unbridgeable divide. Determined to prove that superiority, she unleashes a stronger spell to force that difference on him. Her attack erupts upward in a massive column of power, far beyond the casual push she first intended. Derek watches it without flinching. He lets the blast pass by him with minimal movement, treating it as something he can read rather than fear. The attack detonates harmlessly behind him, proving that her opening move never truly touched him. Elant is left staring in disbelief at what just happened. Derek simply asks what her next attack will be. His composure infuriates her, but it also forces her to admit he had every reason to be confident. Refusing to accept that a commoner could stand on equal footing, she escalates to a far more serious spell meant to overwhelm him completely. Magic spears rise all around the arena as she prepares a barrage from every direction. The summoned lances close in on her command, turning the spar into a genuine attempt to crush him. Convinced this final strike will end the match, Elant sends the full storm of spears down on Derek. The white-haired boy calmly redirects a stream of blue magic instead of meeting it head-on. Elant is caught off guard when she realizes her attack is being handled far too easily. His simple spell bends through the air with such precision that it shatters and slips past incoming projectiles. The redirected force races around Elant and strikes the arena floor near her, forcing her to reassess him. She realizes he is using an elementary spell with absurdly refined control, which is far more alarming than raw power. An observing elder admits that, for a commoner, the boy's magical skill is exceptional and his mercenary background was no bluff. Elant accepts that she underestimated him and decides to stop holding back. She shifts from testing him to launching a serious attack meant to devastate the entire arena if necessary. The boy immediately reads her new intent, noting that she is no longer aiming at him alone but at the battlefield itself, and he respects her adaptability. Elant begins summoning a large number of blazing spears with rapid, practiced precision. She fills the sky above the arena with burning weapons, turning the duel into an unavoidable bombardment. The boy looks up and understands that the attack is too wide to evade normally. He concludes that dodging is impossible, and that he must survive it another way. He drops low and throws up a blue barrier around himself at the last possible moment. The rain of fire crashes down around him, blasting the arena while his shield absorbs the worst of it. Elant watches the explosions spread, expecting the barrage to finish the exchange. Smoke and dust swallow the arena, briefly hiding the outcome. Inside the haze, the boy remains composed and keeps his magic ready. Then he notices an opening and decides to counterattack. Elant suddenly dives in through the aftermath, trying to seize the initiative at close range. He recognizes her move as a point-blank ice spear that leaves no time to dodge or raise another barrier. Even while cornered, he is forced to admit that her talent for instant combat decisions is extraordinary. At the critical instant, he unleashes a blinding flash that disrupts the clash. The sudden light burns Elant's vision and ruins her carefully timed attack. Disoriented, she is thrown back and loses control of the exchange. Half-blind, she panics because she cannot find him anywhere. She tries to steady herself by relying on sound instead of sight, hoping to react once she locates him. A silent blue blade slips past her without warning, proving that even her hearing cannot track him. Elant realizes something moved by her, but hears nothing at all, and begins to understand the trick. Through her blurred vision, she finally spots him standing at a distance with several floating blades under his control. He guides one of those blades in a sweeping arc while keeping his own movements deceptively casual. Another silent strike flashes past Elant before she can react properly. She identifies his technique as a delusion-type spell that erases sound and realizes he even predicted she would rely on hearing. That makes her understand his earlier missed attack was never a mistake but part of a setup. Her irritation flares when she realizes he had been going easy on her at first. He continues controlling multiple silent blades, pressing her from different angles. Elant tries to block, but she knows she has almost no chance of fully stopping attacks she cannot sense. A new threat reaches her before she can finish defending, and she is jolted by how completely he controls the pace now. The boy closes the distance, forcing her into a range where her confusion becomes even more dangerous. Elant refuses to yield and reminds herself that rapid spell manifestation is her specialty. She focuses on beating him in speed, deciding she must cast the instant his hand moves. Her plan becomes simple: manifest first and end the fight before he can finish another trick. She commits to that gamble by launching herself forward. Both fighters spring into motion at once, turning the duel into a contest of split-second reactions. Elant is briefly confused when his movement does not match the attack she expected. Instead of casting from his hand, he releases purple magic through the ground with his foot. Elant is stunned to realize he can manifest magic from his toes, bypassing the timing she was watching for. The ground-born strike slams into her guard and shocks her body with violent force. From the sidelines, the elder sees her thrown back and recognizes that the boy's style is far harder to read than orthodox magic. He judges the boy to be a wild, unconventional fighter whose flow defies the regulated methods nobles are trained to expect. Breathing hard on the floor, Elant can only stare at him in disbelief. Then, instead of resenting him, she openly admits that he is genuinely fascinating. The boy remains quiet and guarded, unsure how to answer that sudden praise. Elant confesses that she had looked down on him and dismissed him as an empty braggart. She rises and faces him directly now that her arrogance has been stripped away. With surprising honesty, she says the fight taught her something important. She thanks him sincerely for that lesson. Even as the last traces of battle magic fade, the tension between them changes from hostility to mutual recognition. The boy studies her carefully, still uncertain whether to trust the sudden shift. Elant steadies herself while the arena settles and the duel effectively ends. Her final defensive burst collapses, confirming that she has lost the exchange. The boy lands above her with the advantage, ready to finish if necessary. His expression stays cold and controlled, showing no triumphal gloating. Elant looks up at him in shock, fully aware that the result is decided. Before anything harsher can happen, the elder rings the bell to stop the match. The official end of the duel spares Elant from further humiliation. She regains her footing as the arena returns to normal. The boy bows politely and thanks her for the match, treating her with formal respect despite winning. Elant is left speechless for a moment by how composed he remains. Later, after the duel, he visits her while she recovers under a pavilion with a maid attending her. Elant praises him as a splendid mage, but he immediately redirects the compliment back to her astonishing reflexes. She takes his humility as proof that he has survived this world through relentless effort, especially as a commoner. He answers simply that he has had to survive as a mercenary. Elant says she likes hardworking people, then warns him that the old magic teacher nearby will probably dislike him. That warning makes him glance toward the elder with fresh caution. Elant adds that their duel taught her a great deal and may help her perform better in the next sparring event. He tells her that with her skills she has little to fear there. She dismisses lesser rivals and reveals that the only person she truly wants to defeat is someone far above them. Her thoughts turn to Aisline Eleanor Duplain, the noble prodigy she measures herself against. At last she names her target outright, Aisline Eleanor Duplain. The name catches the boy's attention immediately. Elant ends the conversation for the moment, and sends him away after talking too long. He leaves, but she keeps thinking about him instead of letting the matter rest. As she lifts her tea, she recalls his full identity as Derek of the Beldon Mercenary Corps. The name feels familiar to her, as if it connects to something she has heard before. Aisline herself confirms that the mercenary's name is Derek. That confirmation shocks Elant because it links him to a rumor she already knows. Meanwhile, Derek walks away, unaware that his past is about to catch up with him. Elant suddenly grabs him before he can leave. She swings around in front of him, stopping his departure by force. He turns back, wary but calm. Elant accuses him of being the mercenary who taught Daila. The story shifts toward evening as that revelation changes the stakes between them. By the firelight, their next conversation becomes far more personal and serious. Elant bluntly declares that if she can beat Aisline, she is willing to do anything. Derek questions whether she truly means defeating Aisline herself. Elant confirms it, saying that even if she cannot reach the next rank first, she at least wants to beat Aisline in the upcoming magic spar. He remarks that her drive is intensely competitive. She admits that competitiveness is the polite word for it, because her feelings used to be much uglier. Derek listens in silence as she prepares to expose her worst motives. Elant confesses that she was jealous of Aisline and came to see that jealousy as filthy and pathetic. She admits she once gossiped about Aisline and searched for flaws, only to be met with kindness and acceptance instead. Derek finally asks why she is telling him something so shameful. She steadies herself before answering, determined to be completely honest. Elant says she wants him to understand her sincerity, even if that means exposing the parts of herself she hates, because she needs his help. Derek gives her permission to continue. She explains that because he stayed with the Duplain family, he should know both how skilled Aisline is and what Elant herself is capable of. That is exactly why she chose to ask him rather than anyone else. Derek waits for the real question. Elant finally asks what she must do to defeat Aisline. He pauses instead of answering immediately. Derek acknowledges that Aisline's level is astonishing, but he also tells Elant that her own talent is tremendous. He begins to say that refinement and hard work could change things, while privately judging her state of mind. Looking into her eyes, he realizes she is not fishing for praise at all. He understands that she is desperate enough to seek an answer even from a mercenary she once disdained. That desperation makes the room feel heavier as he considers how honest he should be. He falls silent again, weighing his words. At last he tells her plainly that she cannot beat Aisline. The blunt verdict hits Elant hard. Derek remains firm, refusing to soften the truth. Even after hearing that, Elant refuses to let go of her goal. She insists that impossible or not, she still intends to win. Her stubborn resolve leaves Derek momentarily at a loss. Then she points out that he turned Daila into a mage, so he should be able to do the same for her against Aisline. She presses him to make her capable of defeating Aisline as well. Derek pauses, not rejecting the idea outright. He says there may be methods worth trying, but before that there are practical issues he needs settled. Elant immediately agrees to hear those conditions. His first concern is whether she even knows how he trained Daila in the first place. He recalls that his teaching involved brutal, life-threatening methods rather than noble instruction. The memory makes clear that his training was closer to battlefield survival than education. He remembers forcing Daila to face deadly pressure so that instinct and power would awaken together. Elant admits she does not know the details, but says she is willing to do anything if it will let her win. Derek moves to his second concern and reminds her that he is a mercenary. Elant assumes he means the social disgrace of a noblewoman learning from someone of his station and dismisses that as unimportant. She insists she is serious, and says she intends to become someone whose name will echo across the empire. To her, failing to dominate even her current social circle would make that dream absurd. When Derek seems to question her motives, she fiercely defends her sincerity, and says she knows there are things more important than pride. He lets her outburst pass without reacting emotionally. Then he clarifies that being a mercenary simply means he expects payment. Elant is stunned by how ordinary his demand is after all that tension. Her embarrassment replaces her anger when she realizes she misunderstood him completely. Flustered, she hurriedly agrees to pay whatever he wants. Derek decides that if she is truly the serious, he should answer her with equally uncompromising methods. The story cuts back to the academy grounds as the next gathering approaches. Aisline hears that another magic sparring match is coming and that Elant has grown even more impressive, so she resolves to train hard as well. Elant also learns the next gathering is already here and decides she absolutely must attend. Aisline is praised for her humility as she arrives among the nobles. Elant approaches her directly with a bright smile, making sure to be seen. She greets Aisline warmly and says she had just been talking about her, while Aisline calmly replies that she heard Elant from a distance. As two onlookers hesitate to interfere, Elant and Aisline continue their tense exchange about the coming duel. Elant needles Aisline by asking whether the undefeated flower of House Duplain really still needs extra preparation. Aisline accepts the praise politely but makes clear that Elant is still an opponent she cannot underestimate. Elant reveals that her confidence comes from hiring a new magic instructor, a highly qualified commoner named Derek, and Aisline notes how much trust that implies. Elant turns the remark back on her, implying that Aisline is the one who already knows and trusts Derek. She drops Derek's name outright, forcing the issue into the open. Aisline is visibly caught off guard by the sudden revelation. Elant takes pleasure in that reaction and boasts that she succeeded in taking for herself what Aisline could not. Aisline can only absorb the blow in stunned disbelief. Instead of showing jealousy, Aisline sincerely congratulates Elant and affirms that Derek is dependable and trustworthy. Her warm approval is so genuine that it completely disarms Elant. Elant awkwardly thanks her, unsettled that her provocation failed to draw the resentment she wanted. Aisline pauses, suddenly connecting this moment to something from the past. She remembers being asked whether Derek could tutor her as well because her own progress had stalled. In that memory, she had panicked and refused, admitting she could not bear to entrust someone precious to her to Derek unless absolutely necessary. Back in the present, Aisline quietly thinks through what Elant's words really mean. Elant presses harder, asking whether Aisline now understands what it means that Derek belongs to her side. She openly invites Aisline's anger and declares Derek to be Elant Alphion Belmiard's instructor now. Aisline starts to respond, but Elant abruptly changes the subject when she notices how late it has become. Elant ends the conversation pleasantly and excuses herself, saying she should leave early because this is Derek's first day teaching her. She walks off in high spirits while Aisline watches, troubled rather than hostile. Aisline hopes nothing goes wrong, reminding herself that Derek is not a bad person. From a nearby tea table, a silver-haired woman quietly observes both girls part ways. She reflects that they are each struggling in their own way. The scene shifts to the town where Derek is staying. At Beldenstier, Derek explains that his work for House Belmiard has grown so much that he will focus on their commissions for now. He adds that handling everything within Ebelstein is convenient because it keeps him from traveling to their estate. The tavern owner doubts Derek's plan, pointing out that defeating Aisline in a duel is far easier said than done. Derek answers that it is difficult, but not impossible. The owner warns that if Elant reaches the 2-star rank, the gap in rank alone will overwhelm even someone as talented as Aisline. Derek dismisses talk about impossibility and asks what practical method could actually change the outcome. He admits that finding such a method is exactly why he needs the owner's help. That request leaves the man wary and confused. Derek clarifies that he also wants Pelline involved for safety. The owner falls silent, realizing Derek is proposing something serious. He finally voices his suspicion that Derek is considering something dangerous rather than merely difficult. Derek answers that reality itself is dangerous, so avoiding risk changes nothing. Pelline suddenly erupts in agreement, revealing she had once been deceived by swindlers and now overreacts to anything risky. Her loud self-pity turns the heavy moment absurd, leaving the others speechless. Even so, the owner relents and agrees to let Derek take Pelline along. By evening, Derek arrives at Elant's estate to begin the first lesson. He immediately announces that they will start with sparring practice. Derek lays out a brutal opening routine of repeated duels before moving on to more detailed magic work, and Elant is stunned by the intensity. He explains that he is first testing her practical combat ability. When he judges her technique rough even for a former mercenary, Elant brushes off the criticism and demands results instead of lectures. Derek accepts that and begins in earnest. The first exchange leaves the training ground wrecked, showing how overwhelming his methods are. Elant is already gasping and drenched in sweat after the opening round. Derek calmly thanks her for the effort, and orders only a 10-minute break before reorganizing her basic magic. Elant is horrified because she has already exhausted her mana. Derek coldly tells her to force more out anyway. When she produces a single ice spear, he dismisses it as insufficient and demands 10 more. He warns that if she cannot even do that much, she has no hope of achieving what she wants. As night falls, he escalates again and orders 100 magic arrows, refusing to accept her excuses about being empty. Elant collapses on the floor, barely breathing. Only then does Derek declare that she has done well enough to eat dinner. He even offers her the option of giving up if the training is too hard. Elant forces herself back up rather than accept that escape. She laughs off the suffering and insists this is nothing compared with what she has already endured. Elant explains that surviving Ebelstein's high society required far worse than physical pain, so this hardship means little to her. Derek realizes he had judged her too narrowly. Elant claims she is only tired because of the social gathering earlier and promises she will truly give her all tomorrow. Derek takes that literally and says tomorrow's training should be even harsher, since the current level is not enough. When he speaks as if tomorrow's session is already decided, Elant finally asks what he means. She still assumes the lesson is over and cannot follow his logic. Derek matter-of-factly reminds her that they are already in the evening session. The absurdity of his schedule leaves her staring at him in disbelief. She tries to laugh it off as a joke, but Derek flatly says he was never asked to be funny. The next day he is already pushing her again, urging her to keep going. Elant struggles to form just a few more magic arrows while Derek watches without sympathy. He insists there is still mana left in her body and raises the target again, which makes her protest in despair. When she can no longer run, Derek simply switches her to manifestation drills, and she drags herself onward rather than refuse. Eventually she can do nothing but collapse into a chair, panting. During a brief rest, she admits to Derek that this suffering is strangely enjoyable. He repeats that if it truly feels impossible, she can still quit. Elant rejects that outright, insisting this level of pain is not even a real workout. Derek studies her in silence, beginning to understand her stubbornness. Then he abruptly ends the rest and tells her it is time to spar again. 2 weeks pass under this relentless routine. At a garden table, an exhausted Elant asks Lady Denise to wake her when Aisline arrives. She admits that training has consumed all of her attention lately. Denise gently asks why she keeps pushing herself so hard. Elant hesitates before answering. At last she gives the simplest truth: she wants to win. Denise is struck by how absolute that answer is. She quietly encourages Elant to endure and promises to cheer for her. That unexpected support leaves Denise herself momentarily surprised. She notices Aisline approaching with other young women from the salon. Denise wakes Elant and tells her that Aisline has arrived. Aisline appears calm and composed as ever. Panicked, Elant hides her face so Aisline will not see the wreck training has made of her. While Elant hides, Aisline is casually invited away by other girls to visit a new clothing store and agrees to go. Elant peeks up in confusion, trying to understand what just happened. When she asks if Aisline already left, Denise confirms that she did. Relieved, Elant worries more about having looked disgraceful than about missing the meeting itself. Aisline, meanwhile, notices from afar that Elant seems unusually worn out. She quietly wonders whether Elant is actually alright. That night, the estate remains lit as Elant continues her harsh routine. Later, while being attended by a maid, Elant is told that House Duplain has sent her a gift. The gift box contains expensive mana-restoring items and a letter. The maid explains that the package appears to be from Aisline and is filled with things meant to help Elant recover her mana. Before the maid can praise the quality of the gift, Elant orders everything thrown away. She repeats the command and refuses even to look at the items. Turning back to preparation, she asks whether Derek has arrived, and learns that he came at dawn to get ready for her lesson. Aisline's letter is revealed to be a warm seasonal greeting sent to the young ladies of Rosia Salon. She writes kindly, asking how everyone is enduring the cold winter. She also shares that her territory has produced many fine goods and that she wanted to send them to the others. The letter closes with a wish for their peaceful day, showing simple generosity rather than condescension. That kindness only deepens Elant's turmoil. Elsewhere, Derek waits alone in the garden with a book before training begins. He senses Elant's approach and turns serious. Elant arrives early and refuses small talk, demanding to get straight to the point. She asks Derek for his honest assessment after weeks of training. Elant insists he stop evading and tell her plainly what he thinks of her now. Derek pauses, choosing his words carefully. He says that giving up can also be a valid strategy. Elant goes silent for a beat, stunned by the answer. Then she lashes out, asking why he keeps insulting her like this. Derek apologizes if it sounded offensive, but he does not retract the point. Elant explodes, demanding to know how Aisline can possibly be beaten if surrender is all he can offer. She reminds him that she hired him to find a way to win, not to tell her to quit. Derek turns away, letting her anger spill out. Elan says that if he is only going to speak nonsense, he should leave because otherwise he is wasting her time. But even in fury, she cannot stop asking what she is supposed to do if victory is impossible. Derek answers that obsession with victory can itself block growth, and that defeat sometimes must be accepted. Elan rejects that completely, saying accepting defeat would make her unbearably pathetic. Derek sees that her desperation runs deeper than pride. Elan breaks down and confesses that she is nothing like the admired figure people imagine, only a petty person who gossiped about Aisline. She admits that jealousy and pettiness were always part of her. Then she goes further, accepting all of her weakness and openly calling herself lacking and pathetic. Even after saying it, she trembles under the weight of that confession. Elan says she already knows there is no reason to hate Aisline, yet the feeling still remains inside her. She finally names the real enemy as a petty inferiority complex that will not disappear. Derek recognizes this for what it is, not simple rivalry, but self-hatred so deep that Elan exposed even her shame to prove how serious she is. He realizes that her true question was never merely how to beat Aisline, but how to escape despising herself. What first looked like ordinary jealousy is revealed as something much darker. The person Elan has hated most all along is herself. Her obsession with defeating Aisline is really the only path she can imagine toward escaping that self-loathing. She stands there crying, unable to hide the pain anymore. In response, Derek offers a simple answer instead of another lecture: they will win. He promises that he will make sure Elan defeats Aisline. Elan steadies herself and accepts that promise. Soon after, an elderly man travels by carriage across the countryside toward Belmiard territory. The carriage rushes onward with urgency. When it stops, the old traveler announces that he has arrived. He looks up with the familiarity of someone returning home. The destination is revealed to be Belmiard Mansion. Count Belmiard welcomes the traveler, Velmer, back from Ebelstein. The Count introduces himself as Tristan and El Belmiard and receives the old man warmly. He immediately asks after his treasured daughter Elant, and Velmer reports that she has recently been devoting herself even more intensely to magic training. A powerful noble praises Elant as a prodigy so gifted that she may one day surpass even him. Her elderly mentor politely agrees while hiding the dangerous fact that her growth has been guided by a commoner. The noble abruptly reveals he will soon be in Ebelstein, catching the old man off guard. He decides to visit Elant personally and frames it as a pleasant surprise. The old man forces a smile and pretends Elant would be delighted, even as he worries the visit could cause trouble. That night, the story shifts to a low-rank labyrinth outside Ebelstein. At the entrance, the group hesitates over the plan. Elant's companions question whether bringing a noble girl into a labyrinth is wise, but trust that Derek has a reason. Elant is stunned to learn she is expected to enter herself, though Derek assures her the labyrinth should be manageable. She anxiously asks what she is supposed to do inside and whether going in unprepared is truly acceptable. Derek tells her real combat is necessary to sharpen her instincts and promises the others will stay nearby as backup. When she protests that her formal sparring match is only days away, Derek makes clear there is no better shortcut. His companions back him, insisting this harsh method is the fastest way to improve under time pressure. Elant can only stare, overwhelmed by what she has agreed to. They enter the labyrinth together and move deeper into its corridors. The oppressive atmosphere immediately unsettles Elant. Derek warns her to stay alert because even a low-rank labyrinth can still kill the careless. His seriousness makes her unease deepen. The archer quietly listens ahead, already reading the danger around them. She reports goblins in front, and Derek confirms he had already heard them approaching. A second warning follows from behind. Something much larger, likely an ogre, is closing in. Instead of retreating, Derek casually asks the swordsman if he can handle the ogre for extra pay. Derek agrees to settle the price later, treating the threat as routine. He turns his attention upward as more enemies gather in the dark. For Elant, the reality finally lands that these are not training props but monsters that can truly kill her. The goblins charge with murderous intent. Derek launches himself into them before they can reach the group. Elant freezes in shock at the sudden violence. Derek orders Pelin to provide covering fire while he cuts into the pack. He dives straight into the swarm, drawing their attention away from Elant. Pelin reacts instantly and takes position to support him. Her arrow drops one goblin before it can strike. Derek follows through without hesitation, fully in control of the melee. He carves through another attacker in a single motion. At the same time, he unleashes fire to keep the rest from surrounding him. Pelin continues firing with calm precision. Derek's blade tears through another goblin as the corridor fills with blood and panic. More goblins fall under Pelin's arrows before they can close the distance. Watching the slaughter, Elant can barely breathe. The sight of real death strips away the last of her sheltered confidence. Behind her, the swordsman meets the ogre head-on and keeps it occupied. Even in battle, he jokes about how much this extra danger is worth. The ogre answers with brute force, turning the fight into a contest of raw strength. The swordsman counters with a heavy slash that bites into the monster. He follows with a crushing blow that staggers it badly. Elsewhere, another goblin burns as Derek's magic and steel keep thinning the pack. A final thrust finishes yet another goblin at close range. Elant finally understands that the monsters are genuinely trying to kill her, not test her. That realization spirals into terror as she sees her own death as a real possibility for the first time. Then Derek's warning cuts through her panic and forces her attention back to the fight. He tells her a monster is coming straight for her and demands that she focus. A goblin breaks through the chaos and rushes her while she is still turned away. Paralyzed by fear, she can think of nothing except that she is about to die. Derek shouts the only instruction that matters: if she wants to live, she must kill. His words strike deeper than the danger itself and force her to confront the person she has been. In that instant she admits to herself how ignorant, arrogant, and foolish she has been. Even as the goblin closes in, she stops running from that truth. She recognizes that her inferiority and resentment have ruled her for too long. Facing death, she finally sees the ugly self she came here to destroy. She accepts that she built nothing herself, and only envied those who had. She admits she spent her life tearing others down instead of growing stronger. At the last moment, Derek's magic reaches her like a hand pulling her back into the fight. That intervention gives her the opening to move instead of freeze. She decides that the self she hates is the one that must die here, not her body. Derek watches without panic, trusting her to act. His spell launches the goblin away from her path and buys her a heartbeat to recover. The swordsman notices the shift in her and waits to see what she will do next. Peline also falls silent, recognizing the moment. Elant finally strikes back and knocks the goblin away instead of collapsing before it. Breathing hard, she steadies herself as fear gives way to resolve. For the first time, determination shows on her face. She looks across the bloodied corridor at Derek, who stands among the dead monsters like a test she has begun to pass. In her heart, she realizes she has finally taken a step forward. She rejects the idea that nothing changed and claims that first step as real progress. The night outside remains still while that change settles inside her. Later, Derek sits in the labyrinth reading a letter addressed to him. The letter opens with an apology for reaching out after more than 2 years away from Ebelstein. Its writer explains she is now teaching magic to the young lady of Elvester County, and has been overwhelmed by the girl's eagerness to learn. She fondly recalls the difficult but freer days when she traveled Ebelstein while teaching Derek. She tells him that of all the mages she has known, he was the most talented. She wonders how far his magic has advanced by now. She asks that when they meet again, he show her the magic he has reached. The letter is signed by his former teacher, Katia Flameheart. Derek quietly finishes reading, the words lingering with him. Elant, now used to these labyrinth visits, notes that 2 weeks have already passed and finally asks what he has been reading. He tells her simply that it is a letter from his teacher. Elant jokes that anyone capable of teaching someone as difficult as him must be extraordinary. Her teasing makes him pause rather than snap back. He answers with unusual sincerity that his teacher truly was exceptional. Elant is caught off guard by the softness in his response. Derek admits he had been about to provoke her again, then decides against it. With the duel only 2 days away, he asks how she feels now. Elant struggles to name it, but she knows something in her has changed. She gathers herself before answering. At last she says with conviction that she will win. The day of the match arrives at the Noble District's magic sparring arena. Among the gathered nobles, Aisline chats pleasantly with the girls around her. She notices Derek's presence, and is immediately drawn to him. Derek passes through the crowd without seeking attention. Aisline excuses herself from her companions to approach him. She calls out to him before he can leave. Aisline warmly greets Derek, and he responds with formal distance. She mentions hearing that he has been helping Elant with her magic. He confirms that he is currently working with Elant's side. An awkward silence follows as old familiarity clashes with present loyalties. Aisline smiles and remarks that he has not changed, then lightly asks whether he has been too hard on Elant. Derek answers by noting that Aisline seems worried about her opponent, and that concern itself reveals confidence. She is startled that he reads her so clearly. He warns her not to underestimate anyone, no matter who stands across from her. His seriousness leaves her unsettled. The arena brightens as the match is about to begin. In the stands, the nobles casually predict Aisline's victory unless Elant can somehow use second star magic. They also gossip that Elant looks worn down and diminished, treating her as a pitiful underdog. Aisline rises to take the field. The crowd admires her beauty as much as her status. She enters with graceful confidence, fully aware of the attention on her. Her measured steps carry her toward the center of the arena. Elsewhere, Elant repeats to herself that she will win until it becomes a vow. She walks out with her focus fixed ahead, shutting out the crowd. By the time she reaches the arena, that vow has hardened into absolute certainty. Derek watches her from the side, arms folded, saying nothing. Elant steps into position opposite Aisline. Aisline greets her politely, and hopes she has been well. Elant returns the courtesy and praises Aisline's composure as something she once admired. Then she rejects that old admiration outright. Aisline confesses that, despite her calm appearance, she has never been this nervous before a duel. Elant answers by inviting her to begin. Aisline's expression hardens as she accepts the challenge. Elant immediately summons blazing fire, revealing a far more aggressive presence than before. Aisline responds with cool blue magic, preparing to meet force with force. The duel opens with both women unleashing large-scale spells instead of probing cautiously. Elant escalates first, chanting and calling down a storm of flaming projectiles. Aisline looks up in shock at the sheer scale of the attack. Dozens of burning spears form overhead and begin to fall. The arena is engulfed by Elant's overwhelming barrage, forcing everyone to recognize that this is no ordinary opening move. Elant stands at the center of the inferno, no longer hesitant or apologetic. The memory of the labyrinth returns, with her still trembling among the corpses after surviving real combat. In that memory, Derek bluntly tells her she cannot win if the duel remains a pure contest of refined magical skill. When she asks what can overcome that gap, he gives a single answer: willpower. He reminds her that he trained her to squeeze every last fragment of mana from herself, not for cruelty but for this exact kind of fight. He explains that once both sides exhaust their mana, victory belongs to the one with the stronger will rather than the cleaner technique. So his strategy is simple and brutal: spend mana extravagantly, make the battle grand, and drag Aisline into attrition. When Elant worries that Aisline's natural mana reserves may simply be greater, Derek answers without comfort that in that case she will lose. He forces her to face the truth that birth decides mana, and noble blood gives Aisline an advantage she cannot erase. He names that reality directly by reminding her that Aisline carries the blood of Belmiard. Elant absorbs that unfair truth without looking away. Derek's final instruction is not about talent at all, but about believing in herself enough to keep going past her limit. Back in the present, Aisline stares up at the descending flames and wonders if this is the strength Elant has gained. Elant raises her hand and commits fully to the attack, determined to force the duel onto the battlefield Derek described. A rain of fire crashes down over the arena as Elant begins the war of attrition on her own terms. A rain of flaming arrows descends as the duel reaches a dangerous turning point. Even so, Elant refuses to yield and gathers her mana for a counter. She raises a powerful water barrier and withstands the bombardment head-on. Elant steels herself with the conviction that she will be the one to win. Across from her, Aisline remains equally determined and presses the attack. The flaming barrage keeps crashing down, but Elant's shield continues to hold. The spectators realize Elant's magic has grown dramatically, with far greater mana reserves than before. Inside the barrier, Elant stays composed while the explosions rage around her. Observers note that Aisline's raw firepower is immense, but she is spending mana recklessly and may burn out first. Elant studies the battlefield instead of panicking under the pressure. Through the smoke, she finally locates Aisline's true position. Seeing an opening, Elant decides it is her turn to strike back. She launches an ice spear at close range with sudden precision. The attack races toward Aisline before she can fully react. Aisline narrowly avoids a direct hit as the spear tears past her. Elant is startled when the hit she expected fails to land. She realizes Aisline used illusion magic as well, despite the enormous mana cost of moving such convincing decoys. Aisline has already slipped behind her and prepares another close-range attack. Elant senses the danger a moment too late. Aisline closes in from above and behind, turning the fight back in her favor. A memory surfaces of Derek calmly insisting that his plan would work. He had advised Aisline to flood Elant's vision with flame arrows, deceive her with illusions, then finish her with close-range ice spears. But Derek had also warned that Elant was no ordinary mage, and would not be beaten so easily. In the present, Aisline commits to the close-range ice spear exactly as planned. Elant recognizes the danger instantly, and realizes the spear is being fired from too close to defend against normally. With no time to erect a proper barrier, she is forced to improvise. She twists her body and gathers mana at point-blank range instead of retreating. Aisline reaches to guide the spear into a killing line. Elant condenses mana into a compact burst right in front of her hand. The sudden blast throws both fighters apart, and breaks the immediate trap. Aisline lands hard but keeps her footing beside the embedded ice spear. Elant also recovers quickly, refusing to let the exchange decide the match. Aisline is shaken by the unfamiliar technique Elant just used. She stares at Elant as if facing someone she no longer fully understands. Elant realizes how close she came to losing in that instant. Derek's warning not to lower her guard against any opponent suddenly makes complete sense to her. She admits to herself that Aisline has changed completely, both in skill and in how she applies magic. Aisline, breathing hard, steadies herself and prepares for the next exchange. Elant decides she cannot stay reactive any longer. Trusting her own superiority in a direct exchange of power, she chooses to push forward with overwhelming force. Ice spears begin forming all around her feet and across the arena. She multiplies them into a field of weapons, turning the battlefield itself into her attack. The audience is stunned that she can create so many ice spears without even chanting. From the sidelines, Derek watches in silence, measuring the shift in momentum. He notes that Aisline has taken the bait and is now fighting on Elant's terms. Aisline braces herself, refusing to back down despite the pressure. Even Derek concedes that Elant's growth is extraordinary. Aisline suddenly snaps her fingers behind her back, revealing a hidden move she had prepared earlier. High above, one concealed flame arrow ignites into motion. Elant sends her ice spears forward, confident she can block anything else as well. Aisline focuses with fierce intent as her trap begins to unfold. She triggers the delayed arrow she had secretly left in the sky from the earlier barrage. The hidden flame arrow curves down toward Elant from an unexpected angle. Elant senses something wrong only when it is already behind her. She is caught off guard by the attack's impossible timing. The delayed arrow streaks overhead, while Elant looks up in disbelief. She realizes she never sensed a new incantation or mana flow because the spell had been prepared long ago. Her mind jumps back to the earlier rain of arrows and the moment she first raised her barrier. She understands that Eislein hid one arrow then specifically for a moment like this. The delayed arrow slams into the ground near Elant, forcing her to reassess everything. Eislein watches tensely, unsure whether the gamble has succeeded. Elant admits to herself that she can no longer read Eislein's next move at all. The spectators are astonished that the two are now fighting on nearly equal footing. Eislein begins to believe she is truly overpowering Elant. Elant, by contrast, concludes that in tactics and boldness she is currently a step behind. She falls silent and reigns in her panic. Instead of forcing the same approach, she starts thinking from the beginning again. Elant decides to reset her assumptions and rebuild her strategy from scratch. Derek watches closely, knowing the real battle is only now beginning. He quietly recognizes that this is the point where the duel's true outcome will be decided. Elant's expression shifts as a new idea takes hold. She releases a vast surge of mana, letting it flood outward around her. Eislein is unsettled by the sudden change and cannot immediately identify what Elant has done. Elant advances inside a roaring aura of mana that transforms the atmosphere of the arena. Eislein feels a violent current like wind, yet realizes it is not wind at all but raw mana itself. The sensation shocks her because it breaks the rules she expected the duel to follow. For a brief instant, she can no longer sense the surrounding mana at all. Derek recognizes the phenomenon and notes that the ambient mana has momentarily vanished. He identifies it as mana alignment, when overwhelming mana temporarily seizes control of the mana in the area. It occurs only when a mage pushes beyond their normal limit and forces the environment to submit. At the same time, Eislein draws on her own power past its safe boundary and forms a massive fireball overhead. She too has now exceeded her limits in this desperate clash. Elant raises her arm and faces the blazing spell without retreating. Eislein unleashes a 2-star fireball, a level of magic far beyond what anyone expected from her. The strain of that feat recalls the exhausted girl she was during training, collapsed and gasping on the ground. In that memory, Derek had quietly cared for her and offered water after pushing her through brutal practice. Still uncertain, Eislein had confessed her doubts to him. She had asked whether she could really defeat Eislein's level of power after only a few weeks of training. Derek had answered with confidence that she would win, but he clarified that her victory would come in a particular way, not by simply surpassing Elant outright. Back in the present, the spectators can barely believe they are seeing fire magic of this scale. They realize in shock that Eislein is casting a true 2-star fireball. Eislein herself is rattled because this overwhelming situation was never what she and Derek had planned for. She turns to Derek for guidance, suddenly unsure how to proceed. He gives her no immediate answer, forcing her to face the moment herself. Panicked and furious, she lashes out at him for being useless when she needs him most. Above her, the gigantic fireball continues to descend like a second sun. Eislein stares up at the spell she created, now terrified by its size and momentum. She frantically searches for defense, but knows ordinary protection or ice spears will not stop a spell of this rank. In despair, she realizes her own fear had been right all along. Elant, seeing her opponent falter, concludes that someone like Eislein cannot defeat the true Eislein she once knew. A white-haired spectator watches with cool attention as the duel reaches its peak. Others in the crowd can only stare in open shock. The fireball crashes down, blasting the arena and hurling Eislein upward in the explosion's wake. Elant is stunned by the sheer violence of the impact. The arena erupts in a massive explosion that swallows the battlefield. Eislein is thrown across the ground by the blast she unleashed. She tumbles through smoke and debris, barely holding herself together. Elant is also left breathing hard, the exchange draining her badly. Eislein forces herself back up despite the damage and exhaustion. Elant is shocked that Eislein survived and even avoided the worst of her own spell. Derek realizes Eislein instinctively copied the same evasive method he had used before, despite seeing it only once. Elant recognizes that Eislein's weakness is still her lack of experience, not her talent. She understands that a 2-star spell in unpracticed hands is as dangerous to its caster as to the enemy, devouring mana without mercy. Even so, Elant clenches herself for one final effort. Derek interprets Elant's full commitment as respect for the effort and talent Eislein has shown. To him, Elant is honoring an opponent who fought desperately enough to deserve her best. Eislein steadies herself again, refusing to collapse before the duel is decided. She finally understands Derek's thinking. If she can endure Elant's final push, she still has a path to victory. Elant raises another fireball, determined to finish the match with her own hands. She declares to herself that she will win and sends the blazing sphere down at Eislein. The fireball bears down, and Elant strains to control it despite her exhaustion. A second massive blast races across the arena toward Eislein. The spectators gasp as yet another fireball appears, faster and more relentless than the first. They realize the attack is moving even faster than before, leaving almost no room to react. Eislein sprints desperately along the arena edge to escape its path. Elant throws herself after the attack, trying to keep control and force the finish. The fireball curves across the floor, chasing Eislein instead of simply flying straight. Aisline flips away at the last moment to avoid being swallowed by it. She uses the momentum of that evasive leap to reposition above the battlefield. For an instant she hangs against the bright sky, suspended between defeat and survival. Elant looks up, struggling to track her through the glare and strain. Aisline falls back down with a new angle of attack in mind. She realizes that if she attacks from above, Elant will have trouble reading the trajectory. Rejecting a wasteful barrier, Aisline commits her last mana to offense instead. Elant sends an ice spear upward and demands to know how Aisline will answer now. But the effort leaves Elant collapsing to one knee, nearly spent. Even so, she drives the ice spear skyward in a final attempt to intercept Aisline. Aisline sees through it, and realizes Elant has exhausted almost all her mana controlling 2 fireballs and counterattacking. She slips past the rising spear and closes in. Elant looks up in alarm as Aisline appears where she did not expect her. From the sidelines, Derek quietly judges that the duel is about to end. Aisline believes she has finally cornered Elant, who should have no mana left to resist. She counts the little mana she still has and decides it is enough for one last finishing spell. Convinced she has defeated Elant, she commits to the final blow. Then she suddenly realizes something is wrong. The fireball's path shifts again, and the battlefield turns against Elant instead of in her favor. Elant is struck and thrown aside by the redirected force. Aisline stands beneath the sky as the last fireball arcs away, stunned by what she has just done. She can only stare in silence, caught between disbelief, exhaustion, and the possibility that the duel's outcome has finally changed. Aisline forces out another burst of ice, but the effort leaves her shaking and nearly spent. Even as her strength fails, she begs herself to keep going a little longer. A faint blue flame finally answers her call, proving she still has some magic left. Her red-haired opponent watches in stunned silence as Aisline refuses to collapse. Aisline steels herself, locking onto what matters most. She is Aisline Eleanor Duplain, a noblewoman famed as the brightest and most admirable lady in Ebelstein. Yet she knows that a brilliant reputation always casts a shadow. That shadow belongs to the red-haired girl who has always lived beneath Aisline's light. From that lower place, the girl has spent her life watching Aisline from behind. She remembers mocking Aisline as just another sheltered noble. She kept pressing that Aisline was no different from anyone else who gossiped and judged. She expected Aisline to turn around and make a humiliating scene. Instead, she was met with calm attention rather than the breakdown she wanted. Aisline's composure only made her shine more. To the girl, every attempt to drag Aisline down only made that radiance harder to bear. Her resentment twisted into a darkness that wrapped itself around her. She felt herself being swallowed by the very brilliance she hated. That bitterness became a plunge into something deeper and uglier. In her mind, she sank into an abyss of inferiority. Even there, trapped and choking on envy, she kept sharpening herself into a weapon. She endured that darkness believing one day she would rise above Aisline. Her vow became simple: escape the hollow abyss by proving she was better. Back in the present, she stands over the exhausted Aisline while that old obsession still lingers between them. Yet even disheveled and dirt-streaked, Aisline still looks like the noble ideal she has always been. After being knocked down before everyone, Aisline still gathers herself without losing dignity. The sight unsettles the red-haired girl, who cannot understand how Aisline can still look that way. She realizes Aisline has no fragile image to defend, and that freedom makes her stronger. Aisline's resolve comes not from pride but from simply doing what she must. The crowd keeps urging Aisline to stand and continue. The red-haired girl prepares another spell, convinced this is the moment to finish things. But her thoughts turn to Derek, the one person whose judgment matters to her. When she once asked whether she could defeat Aisline, Derek told her she would win. That promise became the ground beneath her confidence. Now, at the brink of victory, she realizes winning this fight may change nothing inside her. She fears that even if she wins, she will remain trapped in the same emptiness. Meanwhile, Aisline gathers the last of her blue mana, ready to answer no matter the cost. The red-haired girl suddenly notices Aisline's mana is almost gone. She blurts out that she herself has run out of mana, abruptly ending the clash. Aisline is left staring, unable to understand the sudden surrender. The girl approaches and openly admits that she cannot match Aisline after all. She declares the loss her own and calls the spar worthwhile. The spectators erupt, praising Aisline's performance. Aisline accepts the cheers with her usual graceful smile. But privately she is bewildered by what just happened. The moment hangs in a bright, unreal calm after the tension breaks. Others crowd around to congratulate Aisline and marvel that she has reached 2-star magic. Aisline is startled to hear that her desperate effort has been taken as a triumph. Someone calls out to the red-haired girl, revealing her name as Lady Elant. Derek watches from a distance, having seen the whole exchange. Elant immediately asks him whether he saw everything clearly. She boasts that unlike Aisline, she knows how to admit defeat and enjoys having forced a rare crack in Aisline's composure. Still, she anxiously asks Derek what he thought of her performance. She excitedly recounts how shocked Aisline looked when Elant forfeited, savoring the one moment she felt above her. That fleeting superiority thrills her, and she admits how good it made her feel. Derek listens as she seeks reassurance that, despite the ending, she did well and learned quickly. Instead of indulging her self-criticism, he tells her not to invent faults where there are none. His calm response catches her off guard and strips away her playful confidence. Derek remains unreadable, making her wait for his real judgment. The praise finally breaks through her defenses, and tears well up before she can stop them. Embarrassed by her own reaction, she tries to laugh it off as childish. Derek tells her plainly that she was excellent and that she did well. With no more teasing left in her, Elant can only hide her face and cry. She confesses that she truly wanted to win. But at the moment she could have ended the fight, she saw that victory would still leave her trapped where she had always been. In her mind, that meant sinking back into the same miserable abyss of inferiority. She admits she understood then that this ugliness is part of who she is. Derek stays beside her in silence, letting her speak without interruption. Elant says that even in that painful moment, Aisline still looked noble, which only deepened her shame. She concludes bitterly that she is not really different from the person she envied. Derek answers that looking pathetic for a moment does not matter. His words make her finally listen instead of defending herself. He tells her that anyone too proud to look pathetic can never improve. The two remain alone in the fading light as his lesson settles in. The darkness in Elant's mind begins to lose its hold. She imagines herself standing on that inner abyss without being dragged under. Now she can face Aisline's distant brilliance without immediately drowning in it. For the first time, she feels she has not been trapped by her inferiority. Elsewhere, a white-haired noblewoman quietly observes the aftermath. She and her attendants take their leave after acknowledging Aisline. Before departing, she praises Aisline for another remarkable accomplishment, and says the spar moved her deeply. She then addresses Aisline more personally, signaling a more serious conversation. Aisline admits that she did not truly win the match. The white-haired lady receives that honesty with an knowing smile. Aisline remains thoughtful, unwilling to mistake appearances for reality. The white-haired lady tells her that in raw magical capacity, Aisline is far ahead. Aisline rejects the comfort, believing that advantage was nowhere near enough to close the real gap between them. She is struck by how much Lady Elant advanced in such a short time. Her thoughts return to Derek, the one who made that growth possible. Aisline's expression hardens into resolve. She calls for her maid Daisy. Aisline orders a letter sent to the main house. What she needs, she decides, is Derek. The scene shifts to the Duplain main estate, where the request arrives. A senior noble reads the letter and is startled that a 6-star travel pass connected to Dreist Wolftail has appeared in Ebelstein. He is informed that the custom schedule was moved up, likely in response to Dreist's movements. That makes him suspect the Count of Belmiard's visit to Ebelstein is tied to Dreist as well. If a master of search arts with foresight is involved, he concludes there must be a larger reason behind all of this. Another report arrives. Aisline has also requested a magic teacher. At first, her father sees no difficulty in simply finding one. The problem is that she specifically asked for Derek, who is currently teaching Lady Elant at the Belmiard estate. Rather than refuse, Aisline's father begins considering how to negotiate for Derek directly. But the blonde nobleman beside him decides there is no need for intermediaries. Since he must go to Ebelstein over the Dreist matter anyway, he will handle it himself. As evening settles, the decision is set in motion. Back at Belmiard, Elant tells Derek she is taking a break from study and work to clear her head. Derek listens, sensing she is not finished. She insists she needs time off from lessons and everything else for a while. Then she asks whether he will keep working for the Beldun Mercenary Corps. Before he can answer further, she stops him by calling his name and reaching out. Leaning close, she asks if he will come again whenever she calls, specifically to teach her magic. Her request is direct, personal, and impossible to mistake. Derek pauses, weighing what that promise would mean. He agrees, but warns that there may not be much left for him to teach her. Elant laughs off his modesty, hearing it as rare humility. As winter finally gives way, she reflects that the long season has ended for both of them. That night, the Beldun Mercenary Corps tavern comes into view. The door bursts open with sudden urgency. Inside, the mercenaries are jolted out of their routine by the unexpected arrival. Someone immediately calls out for Derek. Derek steps in and announces that he has returned. At once, the pace shifts as danger rushes in. A carriage speeds toward the city under a bright sky, carrying new trouble with it. Inside, Elant's father rides with clear purpose. Meanwhile, Elant sleeps peacefully, unaware of what is coming. When disturbed, she protests that her rest has only just begun and refuses more lessons. Her maid nervously insists that this interruption cannot be ignored. Elant drags herself out, expecting a minor nuisance. Still half asleep, she starts complaining before she even sees the visitor. Then her father greets her with his usual overwhelming affection, calling her his treasure. He waits outside her room with complete confidence that he will be welcomed. Elant is stunned that her father has come in person. She quickly forces herself into a polite smile and promises to change and come out at once. Left outside, her father continues doting on her with theatrical affection. The story cuts away from the awkward reunion to a brighter, harsher turn. Someone remarks that the young lady of Duplain could not have been an easy opponent. Derek answers that she was difficult, but that he learned much from facing her. Elant's father immediately decides that a teacher this useful should be kept for Belmiard alone. Elant realizes with alarm what her father is planning. She objects that the vassals will resist such a move, but he dismisses the concern and promises to do anything for her. His confidence makes her want to trust him, even if she does not fully understand the cost. Far away, a sealed gate hints that another threat is already stirring. A violent surge erupts around a stone structure, signaling an attack or breach. A blonde companion warns Derek that something is coming from behind him. He pivots just as a monstrous attacker lunges, drawing on blue power to respond. In the same instant, a far more dangerous red energy ignites in his hand. Derek recognizes the sensation at once as a new threshold. He releases the power in a devastating strike that tears through the enemy. The breakthrough is identified as 3-star magic. The spell he unleashes is Firewall. A blazing barrier explodes outward, swallowing the charging monster and ending the scene with Derek's power newly advanced. News breaks that Derek nearly died, jolting everyone who hears it. The shock of that incident spreads outward like a sudden disturbance. By the next transition, the story settles into the aftermath of that scare. At Beldam's Tier, someone struggles to believe Derek was really pushed that close to death. A frustrated young woman condemns Derek's recklessness, baffled that he tried a 3-star spell while merely hunting goblins. Derek explains that during the attempt he felt a strange mismatch in the spell, similar to the sensation he had when first breaking into 2-star magic. Rather than panic over being stuck, he has already begun thinking about a more natural way to advance. He argues that forcing progress is wrong and wonders whether the School of the Wild was originally meant to follow a natural flow instead. As he turns that idea over, an unseen observer quietly closes in on the tavern scene. The newcomer dismisses such advice as something that rarely works on mages like Derek. Derek realizes the old man before him gives off no detectable mana at all, yet can only be the legendary first 6-star search-type mage. The stranger casually asks for good alcohol and reveals himself as the wandering spirit, Dreist Wolftail. The story shifts to another place and another night, where Derek's influence is already reaching others. A young noblewoman trains alone, surrounding herself with blue mana as she tries to push her magic further. She commits fully to the exercise, drawing multiple constructs into being around her. With intense focus, she attempts to control the spell precisely. She succeeds in manifesting several spear-like projections at once. But the strain quickly shows, and her control begins to falter. The summoned spears continue to form around her, threatening to slip beyond her command. She realizes too late that the spell is becoming unstable. One of the constructs shatters, signaling that her technique is breaking down. The girl collapses in irritation, furious that the spell keeps resisting her. A man appears behind her and teases that she has matured little, because her temper is unchanged. He notes that despite her tantrum, she still managed to draw out 5 spears, hinting that someone has taught her well. She proudly claims the achievement as her own and immediately rejects the idea that Derek deserves any credit. The man needles her by saying Aisline plans to hire that same selfish Derek as her magic instructor, which makes her panic at the thought of Aisline being treated as badly as she once was. He adds that Elant also intends to keep employing Derek, making Derek's demand even more obvious. She cannot understand why Derek is suddenly so sought after. The man bluntly answers that Derek turned a troublemaker like her into a decent person, so of course people value him. Her anger softens into reluctant admission, and she starts wondering whether Derek choosing Aisline might actually be better. The man presses further, suggesting that if Derek goes to Aisline, she might get a chance to see him again. She flusters instantly and denies wanting to see Derek at all, exposing feelings she cannot hide. Elsewhere, word about Derek continues spreading, and another interested party worries that too many rivals are gathering around him. A silver-haired young woman quietly hopes the competition for Derek does not grow any further. The story returns to Beldam's Tier, where Derek remains with the mysterious old man. Dreist drinks at ease while Derek studies him warily, unable to dismiss the encounter as ordinary. Derek cannot understand why someone of Dreist Wolftail's stature would appear in a humble tavern like this. Dreist confirms Derek's identity, making it clear he came here specifically for him. Derek answers cautiously, unsettled that such a figure already knows who he is. Dreist asks to speak privately, signaling that his interest in Derek is serious. Derek hesitates, but the gravity of the request keeps him listening. Their conversation moves away from the tavern and into a more secluded setting. As they walk, Dreist tells Derek that his magical talent is unusually hard to define, even for someone as knowledgeable as himself. Derek listens in silence, sensing that this is no ordinary praise. Dreist asks why Derek works so hard and what he truly hopes to gain from magic. Derek answers that he has no grand ambition and only wants to see how far the talent he has found in himself can go. That simple curiosity impresses Dreist more than any lofty dream would have. Dreist smiles as if he has found exactly the kind of person he was looking for. He warns Derek that a commoner who wants to rise beyond his station is still lacking something essential. Then he offers to help Derek bridge that gap himself. The offer hits Derek with full force once he remembers that this man is Dreist Wolftail, a 6-star mage. Dreist's legend is recounted. Born a commoner, he reached 2-star by adulthood and 3-star by the time he had a family, becoming a beacon for other commoner mages. But the year he advanced to 4-star changed everything. On a stormy night, Dreist returned home to disaster. He found his household destroyed and his family slaughtered. That loss shattered the man he had been. In the aftermath, nobles reassured one another that Dreist had gone into hiding and that commoner mages had finally quieted down. They mocked the fear they had shown and sneered at commoners for daring to covet magic at all. One noble began speaking of what should be done if Dreist ever resurfaced. He never finished the thought. A severed head answered the room before anyone else could. Dreist entered and began his revenge without hesitation. The survivors recognized him instantly and were overcome with terror. Even mutilated enemies rushing him could not slow him down. He cut through them as if their resistance meant nothing. Their power and status collapsed the moment they faced him directly. The last noble begged desperately for mercy, apologizing only when death was already upon him. His pleas came too late to matter. The massacre announced Dreist's return to the world. For the next 30 years, he lived as a fugitive while the imperial family and nobility hunted him. Only after Dreist surpassed 5-star and became a 6-star mage did the imperial family finally understand the danger of keeping him as an enemy. They concluded that opposing him any longer would endanger the entire kingdom. So they publicly acknowledged that his revenge had been justified and protected their own authority by granting him a title. In the end, Dreist became a noble solely because his magic had made resistance impossible. Hearing all this, Derek realizes he is being offered instruction from a man who forced the world to bow to him. He sees no reason to reject such a chance. Meanwhile, in the noble district, powerful men gather to discuss territory and influence. One Grand Duke warns another about the dangers of expanding into the White Zone and its labyrinths. Grand Duke Veltus offers military support if needed, presenting himself as cooperative while measuring the room. Another noble derides those forces as little better than mercenaries. Veltus's expression hardens, and the political courtesy begins to crack. He coolly suggests that a lord unable to govern his land with private soldiers should consider surrendering the territory instead. The insult lands heavily on the man he targeted. A third noble tries to defuse the tension by steering the conversation toward their children and recent events. He mentions that Elant fought Aisline nearly evenly, inviting comparison between the two girls. Elant's father admits she lost, but boasts that her talent is finally blooming. He adds that with the right instructor, Elant will surely surpass Aisline. That remark leads directly to Derek's name. Elant's father argues that if Derek teaches Aisline instead, Elant will never overtake her. Aisline's father bristles at the implication that Derek can simply be claimed away. Elant's father hints that Derek's bond with Elant runs deep, while Veltus dismisses that as a shallow reading of Derek's character. Watching the exchange, Veltus privately wonders who Derek really is if both sides are this eager to secure him. He decides he should have Denise investigate Derek more closely. Back in town, the struggle over Derek reaches Beldam's tier directly. Elant's father arrives at the tavern in person with attendants, making his interest impossible to ignore. The tavern owner immediately senses trouble. The noble demands to know whether the owner is the commander of this mercenary corps. The untouched drink on the table underscores how abruptly the visit has turned serious. The noble explains that because his butler's letter received no answer, he has come himself to settle the matter. The owner apologetically reveals that Derek has been missing for several days, and that they have been searching for him too. He adds that Derek recently refused all requests, and then suddenly vanished. The noble immediately suspects a rival house may have taken Derek first, but realizes there is no evidence of that yet. He resolves to find Derek personally before anyone else can secure him. At another estate, Denise receives that concern in the form of an urgent letter while calmly eating fruit. She reads without much urgency, treating the matter with detached amusement. When she asks when the letter arrived, she learns it was sent early that morning with great haste from the family patriarch. The message orders her to quickly find Derek and make him her instructor, because the mercenary side is currently at its weakest. Denise finds the command irritating rather than compelling. Still, she recognizes that the day matters for reasons entirely her own. She smiles to herself, because what she has really been waiting for is not politics but a book release. Her long-awaited novel finally comes out, and her thoughts are consumed by curiosity over its romantic hero rather than Derek. Even so, she decides she may as well act now, since ignoring the order would only bring more nagging later. She calls for her maid Bella. Then she orders her clothes prepared, deciding to head out because she now has someone to find. Far from the city, Derek's private training with Dreist continues in a hidden cave. The cave becomes a secluded world where Derek can focus entirely on magic. Teacher and student sit across from one another beside still water, removed from every outside pursuit. Dreist instructs Derek to close his eyes, release his mana as a fine mist, and feel how it touches the world and returns. Derek follows the guidance with intense concentration. As his mana spreads, the cave begins to reveal itself to him in a new way. Dreist explains that this is the foundation of search-type magic. At 1 star it detects threats, and from 2 star onward it can track locations and sense magic. He continues that 3 star sees through disguises, while 4 star lets one perceive through an opponent more deeply. At 5 star, a mage can read minds and speak with the dead, and at 6 star comes the power to see the future. Derek is stunned that search magic can reach as far as foresight. Dreist confirms it, and reveals that he saw the future, then came to find Derek because he needs him. Derek immediately asks what fate Dreist saw awaiting him. Dreist answers with a name from Derek's past, Valerian. He identifies Valerian as the eldest son of House Duplain, tying Derek's future danger to a noble bloodline. Dreist warns that before Valerian even reaches adulthood, he will begin dabbling in necromancy. That revelation deeply unsettles Derek. Dreas states the conclusion plainly: Derek must kill Valerian. Derek absorbs the order without panic, but with grave focus. When he asks why Valerian would turn to necromancy, and what he intends to do, Dreas refuses to reveal more. He explains that knowing too much about the future too carelessly only makes what lies ahead more unstable and complex. Still, he offers one final truth. Dreas tells Derek that he is fated toward death. Dreas is surprised that Derek does not react with fear. Derek calmly points out that being destined to die is not the same as being guaranteed to die. That answer confirms to Dreas that Derek understands fate better than most. Dreas admits he does not want Derek to die either. He vows to prevent that outcome by making Derek strong enough to survive. With that decision made, Dreas unleashes a far greater display of power to begin Derek's real training. The mana gathering in his hand swells into something vast and unnatural. Dreas declares that Derek's chances of dying are overwhelmingly high. His magic erupts outward on a scale that dwarfs the cave and reaches into the night sky. Under the moon, Dreas stands like a force of nature while Derek watches the true level of a 6-star mage. Derek meets that overwhelming power with sharpened resolve rather than retreat. By day, the city continues on as if none of these hidden struggles are reshaping its future. Carriages and pedestrians move through ordinary streets, unaware that the race for Derek has already begun. And as the world keeps turning, the search for Derek and the future Dreas foresaw both move one step closer. A silver-haired noblewoman named Denise lets her maid Bella dress her in unusually elegant clothes before heading out herself. When she appears in town, the townspeople openly stare, struck by how different and refined she looks. Denise tells Bella to stay behind and rest, but Bella obediently follows her anyway. As they walk through the street, Denise notices the attention gathering around her. She wonders why everyone keeps looking at her. Bella dryly pretends not to know the reason. Denise studies herself and begins to suspect the answer. She lands on the simplest explanation and asks if it is because she is pretty. Bella gives her a measured look instead of indulging her immediately. She reminds Denise that her usual habits are slovenly and unkempt, making this polished version especially startling. Bella bluntly adds that Denise may actually be worse when she tries this hard, and Denise laughs it off until Bella insists she means it. Bella urges her to hurry because other houses may recruit Derek first, but Denise stays confident that she is still ahead of everyone else. When Bella points out Denise is always late with her lessons, Denise shifts back to the real issue and reviews what she knows about Derek disappearing after rejecting all offers. She reasons that a man who values money would only vanish if something even more important had appeared. Remembering Derek's extraordinary talent with magic, Denise narrows that possibility to a major magical opportunity. She concludes he must have found either a remarkable grimoire or a superior teacher, enough to make mercenary work irrelevant. But since Derek willingly left the Duplain mansion, one of the best places for magical training, Denise realizes the answer must be even bigger than that. She reaches a startling conclusion that Derek found something better than even House Duplain could offer. That thought leads her toward a specific suspicion. Bella interrupts her deduction to announce that they have arrived. Their destination is Beldenstyr, the tavern where Derek had been staying. Inside, the innkeeper greets what he assumes are ordinary customers. Then he notices who has actually come to his door. Realizing a noble lady has come in person, he immediately becomes cautious. He claims he does not know where Derek is and says several other groups have already questioned him that morning. Denise abruptly asks whether Dreas Wolftail, the old mage, had also visited. The innkeeper's startled hesitation gives her the confirmation she wanted. Denise thanks him, satisfied that his reaction answered more than his words did. She leaves at once, deciding the next step is to inspect carriage transit records. The search moves to the Coachman's Guild in Ebelstein's commercial district. While Bella reviews documents, she asks how Denise knew Dreas had been there. Denise explains that Derek abandoning a 5-star mage's mansion by choice made the answer obvious. If Derek is that obsessed with magic, she reasons, only something beyond a 5-star mage could have drawn him away. She admits she also knew a 6-star mage was coming to Ebelstein and simply gambled that Dreas would be involved. The gamble worked perfectly, and Denise is pleased with herself for fooling the old man so easily. She immediately turns that success into self-praise and asks if this means she is smart. Bella remains unimpressed. She answers that Denise rarely uses her brain enough to prove it, and Denise takes the insult as playful admiration. Denise theatrically complains that being so capable is exhausting and wishes she could be useless for once. Bella finally asks whether Denise actually enjoys being talked back to, since she never seems to hear anything except praise. Bella then returns to the practical concern that even if they find Derek first, recruiting him may be impossible with powerful houses like Duplain and Belmiard competing for him. Denise dismisses that worry as the easy part and claims she already has a plan. Her plan is shamelessly simple. She intends to lure Derek with herself. Bella is mortified, but Denise insists a young man like Derek could never reject someone as beautiful as she is. Bella points out that their real rival is Lady Eislein, not Denise's imagination. Denise immediately fixates on the only part that matters to her and demands reassurance that she is prettier. Before the argument can continue, Bella finds the record they need. The document shows that a week earlier a robed boy carrying a travel pass passed through. His route leads to the outskirts of Ramhell Hill, specifically the Laspa Great Cave. The search shifts from the city to the mouth of that vast cave. Deep inside, Derek is quietly training with an elderly mage beside an underground stream. The old mage senses an intrusion before anyone appears. He tells Derek that visitors from House Veltus have arrived. Since they seem to be Derek's pursuers, the old mage leaves him to deal with them himself. The cave falls quiet for a moment as the newcomers draw nearer through the dark. Wading into the flooded cavern, Bella grows frightened and urges Denise to stop and return with soldiers after reporting to the Patriarch. Denise refuses because bringing others would cost her the personal credit for finding Derek. She also argues that involving soldiers could alert rival houses and hand the reward to someone else. Bella suddenly spots movement ahead and panics. Red eyes appear in the darkness, and Bella mistakes them for a monster. Despite her own fear, Denise steps in front of Bella and tells her to stay behind her. Denise is shaken that a supposedly cleared cave still holds danger, and she knows offensive magic is not her strength. Even so, she decides she has no choice but to fight. Someone approaches across the cave floor before she can cast. Denise begins a spell anyway, summoning blue magic while Bella recoils behind her. The figure emerges enough to reveal a battered young man with glowing red eyes. Denise freezes mid-cast as recognition hits. Derek addresses her directly and asks why Lady Denise has come to a place like this. Realizing the supposed monster is the mercenary she has been chasing, Denise is stunned. The two sides finally face each other in the cavern, with Bella shrinking back while Denise steps forward. Denise's fear gives way to a pleased, predatory smile as she sees her chance at last. She decides that now that she has found Derek, she will make him belong to her.